Anna's. It's like one more thing that I just realized that I know very little about. So
Crew. Yep. I think they have a crew team there.
UT?
Yeah, they raced down the canal or something, right?
I'd be surprised if they didn't, for sure, based on the location and what they have with Lake Austin right there. But
Yeah.
my thing was, you're telling me that when you did crew,
I rode, but I wasn't a lightweight. That's a lightweight. That's called lightweight.
okay, so you were in the big boy boats?
Yeah. Of course. Do I look like I couldn't make
How tall are you,
160?
Big Bill?
6'3".
That's it?
There's no way I'd make 160 pounds in my weight. I'm too big bone. I'm too Swedish for that.
When do you think the last time in your life was when you were 160 pounds?
8th grade,
Shut up.
7th grade,
Shut up.
probably.
How tall were you then?
I don't know, 6 foot.
All right, so
I
you were
don't
still
know.
growing.
I was
Eighth
still
grade.
growing. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how tall you were in 8th grade. I hardly remember.
Well, if you kind of remember your weight, right? So I'm like,
Well,
were you-
I'm just guessing. I just remember when I was a senior in high school, I was 205.
did you play sports?
Yeah, but I was overseas, so we didn't have football. And
Oh, that's all right. Well, we're gonna get into the story. So,
All right, I got the story.
first of all, thanks for coming. Why don't you introduce yourself to all these people? Yeah.
So my name is Bill Clark. I work for Microsoft. Been with them as a vendor for about 9 years, and then as an actual FTE for the last 6. So it seems like forever in the data center world.
Yeah,
But,
just getting started. 15 years there, huh?
Yeah, it's '07, and I'm terrible with math, so that probably doesn't work out specifically to 22. But
Where are you originally from?
so born in Japan, raised in Africa.
Okay, explain all of that.
So parents were missionaries. My mom was went out as a single woman to Japan in like 1951 or something like that. Like the war had just ended a little while ago.
Your mom went there in 51.
By herself on a cargo boat back in the day.
And she was a
then
missionary then.
She was a missionary. Learned
Where was she from?
Seattle.
Okay.
Yeah, that's our Seattle connection that we're all
Gotcha.
from. So she lived there 5 years, fluent in Japanese. She was up in the villages where they had never seen an American. They had never seen a white person before. And, again, they just lost the war to
Oh,
the
sure, so
Americans.
everyone's an
So it was
enemy.
really, she's like a 5'11" Norwegian walking around with all these Japanese. So she definitely stood out. Came home, met my dad. Then they both decided to go back out for another 5 years. And then 3 of the 4 of us kids were all born in Japan.
So your mom started in Japan, met your father back in the States, and then they together went to Africa, but you were still
No,
born
I
in
went to Japan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Went back to Japan. Then we were all born there.
Okay.
Came home to the States. Because that in the day, missionaries used to do, that was kind of the deal. I don't know why. 5 years, and then you come home for a year. Before they had big, airplanes and all that, their cargo ships and all that. So anyway, came home from the States and then decided to go to Africa. So Liberia, which is on the west coast of Africa by Ivory Coast. And so that's where pretty much I grew up from 5th grade to graduate from high school.
So prior to that, though, were you pretty fluent Japanese?
I was, we left when I was 3. So
Oh.
that 3-year-old could speck in the
Sprecken's the
sprack in
Japanese.
the Japanese
Can you
at
still
a
rock
3-year-old
those?
level.
You
And
can
then
still
it
master
all-
those
no.
chopsticks?
Yeah, that's about all the Japanese I know is whatever I can do with these.
Oh, man.
So,
You're such a
lost
disciplined.
it all.
You would have been a lot cooler if you talk about like how you do the bowing thing still. and-
My right brain is like gone. I think that's where language is your right side, and I don't have that.
Oh, I
Same
got
thing
you.
with artistic ability. That's the right side.
I have that same thing, but on both sides.
That's
So-
right. Never know where you're.
So Japan, and then to Liberia, and then did you have to? Were you in like an expat type of school?
Yeah, so it was, there was an embassy school. I went to a boarding school. I went to like 11 schools before I graduated from high school. So I jumped around a lot. But the school there was run by the American Embassy. Back in the day, and I'm really dating myself, they didn't have satellites. And so all the communications, Liberia seemed to be really good for radio communications. So all the communications from the U.S. embassies would go to Liberia and then to New York or then to D.C. And so big embassy personnel because of that need. And so they had a lot of families there. And so they had a school there for all of it.
Okay.
So I grew up there.
What grades?
Like 5th grade to graduation.
Get out.
Yeah. I went to a boarding school for a little bit, in the middle of all that. But anyway,
Not where they just send bad kids.
yeah, relates.
So when you were there, was there anything that you were learning culturally besides, I mean, maybe the language, maybe how to cook their food, or
Yeah, so Liberia is freed slaves who decide to come back from America. Monrovia is after President Monroe, who helped make that happen. And so Liberia is the only independent country that was never colonized in Africa. And so it was very, it's not as well off as some of the other countries that had a European back at the time. Like Ivory Coast is French, and the French put a lot of money into the infrastructure and so on, where Liberia didn't get that. So they had to fight their way through it all. So a little poor, definitely third world, grew up in a third world country, you know, no radios, no TVs, none of that stuff. I think there was one radio station at the time.
really?
So yeah, rode motorcycles all over, you know, so you get this kind of a small town feel and also third world feel of living in, you know, like in Africa and what you would think about it. We lived up in the jungle for about a year and then came back. And
How do you like it?
it's, you know, it's an interesting, you grow up as a minority too, which is, I think has been a great, I don't know if a great help, but definitely a different perspective. You know,
How's that?
well, because you're the white guy, you know,
So you know what it felt like to be,
yeah, you kind of feel
outsider.
like when everyone around you is not, and so you kind of understand when some people feel that they're ostracized just because of what they look like, because nobody else looks like them, and that's not, it might not always be the case, but just since humans are so visual, we run into a lot of that of, you know, just everybody looks different, so now I feel a little different than anybody else.
Did you ever feel threatened from that?
No.
You never felt
No,
like
there was a coup after I left. Typical Africa has coups all the time, sadly. But it was really pretty friendly. Had a lot of my friends were Africans, growing up with them, and the school was for embassy or also anyone who could pay the money, which ended up being more of the Secretary of Education gave a graduation speech because his son was in it. So I knew a lot of the higher government officials' kids because they sent their kids to this school, which was
Really?
sadly because then when the coup happened, a lot of those guys were killed. A lot of their family members were killed, and they had to escape. And
Really?
so you get that what happens in a country when a coup comes in and takes over. And
So those were okay. So your friends that were the local Africans, they were the ones that were killed, but not the
Yeah.
not the expats.
not most of the expats had left by then. You know, we kind of the embassy tells people it's time to go. You know, and they get out. And it was really that coup was definitely take over the government, and the expats aren't involved in that. So you by hurting them or doing anything with them, you're not going to gain anything. Where you have fighting tribes or fighting groups of who wants to be in charge. Salute. Thank you,
Salute.
sir.
Never had this before, you said? It's one of my favorites. I used to have a hard time.
I haven't been to this barbecue place either. So
What do you think about that?
a little free advertising for them, and you know they're hardly making it. I could tell.
Yeah, that place is
Jeez.
bananas. But I'll tell you, I don't think they make barbecue like that in Liberia.
No, I haven't had really good barbecue till I came here. I'm from Seattle. You know, us West Coasties don't have good barbecue either. So
So what did your parents just know? What do you think about that, by the way?
I like it. It's smooth.
Tasty,
It's
huh?
not too hot either.
So did your family have a sense? Did they get out ahead of the coup because they just could read the tea leaves better, or did they just happen to be gone?
No, the embassy. So I had already left for college. My sister and I both are a year apart, and we had left for college, and so it was just my two brother and sister, and my parents were there. And then things deteriorated, and then there was literally a takeover by the military, and then they
From
locked
who though? So it was a coup from the military? to the-
internal. Yeah. Most,
Yeah.
it wasn't another country. It wasn't an invasion. It was a coup.
Normally they're backed by a neighbor that's like,
Yeah, this was so. The politics of Liberia is a lot of the freed slaves who came back to form the government, and they end up being the upper class. So if you could trace your roots back to coming on the boat, then you were the upper class in Liberia politics, and then the tribes that were already there, the people that were living there, were more of the lower class. So it was really a class system. In typical third world, you have an upper class and a lower class. You have no middle class, or a very small middle class, and that's what you had there was very, very poor, or they thought was very rich, and the poor want to take the rich. So the poor end up being the military and end up making that move. So
So you had so you have an older sister and then a younger.
no, I'm the oldest. It's boy, girl, boy, girl.
Gotcha. So how much older? What's the age differences?
18 months for my sister, and then a couple years for my brother, and then 6 years between the youngest sister and me.
So when you were there and you graduated high school there, how big was your high school?
We had 32 in our graduating class.
Is that big?
Yeah,
big,
about
actually.
average 30.
Okay, so about 100,
That's K
120
through
people.
12. Yeah, so there's
Oh, that's
maybe
K through 12.
K
Okay.
through 12, probably 200 kids total.
Okay.
So
Was
small.
that cool going to school?
Yeah, it's typical. I mean, we had huge. You see Liberia, it's along huge ocean beach, so you have all sorts of beaches, and you have everyone's riding motorcycles, because it's the cheapest way, and you don't really need a driver's license very much, and so it's kind of a small town feel. You grow up, and because there isn't multimedia, there is now. Everybody goes and does stuff together because there's nothing else going on.
Sure.
There's no TV to watch. And
Yeah.
like I said, there's one radio station or two radio
So
stations.
did you learn how to surf?
You know what? And they do have surfing in Liberia, and they I just saw they had a surfing competition there for the first time.
Wow.
So weird.
Do you ever keep up with any of those people that you met?
Yeah, we have. There's Facebook. Facebook helped bring that together. There's American Cooperative School Facebook page,
Really?
and there's a few that I know. But the issue, of course, is your families are there, but you're not from there. So when you leave, they go to all over the world. So you don't all meet up in California where you went to high school,
Sure.
or Washington. You have to go and do like a college reunion where you all get together somewhere because everyone's from somewhere else.
So
So,
when you-
very rare.
Well, when you graduated from there, what did you do?
Went back to States,
Where at?
Southern California,
Where did you go to school?
Biola University, little Christian school down there in La Mirada, California, and
Sure.
thought I'd go,
Family business?
go to school there and then go to, go and
Michigan.
study at the beach and stuff. And that ended up really doing terrible for my GPA. So,
Well, what was the biggest change? Was it going from 30 people in your graduating class to
no, it's the cultural change. Culture change of coming to America and seeing the abundant wealth and how everything compared to what third world where you grew up, and having anything you want at a store, and those things are what blows you away.
like McDonald's and Happy Meals? And
Well,
John
yeah,
Deere,
just a grocery store or a hardware store, or
like
anything.
everything's easily available, you mean?
Yeah, that's.
Especially where you were living in Southern
But
California.
you're also a college student, and all of a sudden you're seeing thousands of people that like you said, from a small town to a big town, and so it's all overwhelming for a little while, until you get the hang of it. And some people don't. I mean, there's a big whole trend. People have talked about it on how kids who grow up in cultures have a real problem. They're not
Adjusting.
They may live in one culture, but they're not really part of that culture. And then they come back to their country, and they're not part of that culture either, because they don't have the same things that they do. They don't have the same remembrances as your junior high or your high
Yeah.
school, your music you listen to, because they're embedded in another culture, but that's not theirs either. So they're caught between cultures.
What made you decide not to go be like mom and dad?
Not that it was. I was gonna fly. I was gonna be a pilot for a long time, and do missionary flying and stuff like that. And then just slowly kind of rolled out. And then as I got closer to graduation from college, I started to get interested in the military. So that was I got to see the world, see things. So that turned into a bigger. Attraction, I guess, at the time.
When you were in when you were in college, at what point did you consider the military?
Not. So I still say this. I was standing there. There was a Marine Corps recruiter in our commons at our college, and I was a sophomore. And he goes, "I want you to think about joining the military, and you just owe us. We'll do your scholarship, and then you owe us, 4 more years after that." And I looked at him. You want me to commit 6 years of my life right now? And this, I was like, there's no way in heck. I can't even do what I'm doing next semester. So I was definitely not ready for that immaturity at level.
Sure.
So the West Points and Naval Academy, all those those kids deciding to join,
That
doing
early?
4 years of college and then 8 years in the military or whatever, is really unbelievable to me. But it wasn't until I get ready to graduate from college that I decided.
Why? Why then?
I was coaching. I was going to be a coach.
What were you coaching?
I was coaching crew. I had
that what
rowed
you
crew
did?
in college.
Oh, okay. Is that where you learned it though? Is that where
I
you...
learned it, yeah. Especially in America, unless you're on the East Coast, West Coasties don't have a lot of crew teams in high school or so on. But in college, we learned to row, and so
What
I
made
did
you
that.
go out for it?
What?
What made you go out for it?
My next door neighbor was an Olympic oarsman. Throw out to a guy named John Twilliger, who's from Wyoming of all places, and he learned to row, and he was rowing, and I said, I need to get in freaking shape, and he goes, well, come on out.
Shut up.
So
Was it
we
all on the boat, or were you doing those trainers?
No, you just on the boat, rowing your butt off.
How much would you guys row? Like, what's the most you've ever rowed?
We used to row around Mercer Island in Seattle for a fundraiser, so that was about 30 miles
How long would that take?
around it, and then so that would take us probably 6 hours of rowing, of just going
Man, you guys
around
suck.
the. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can do it in a motorboat so much faster.
It would really take me no time at all if I was just trying.
So yeah,
6
we'd row
hours.
and row and row. Yeah, we'd try to raise money so much per hour or whatever, and then we'd row all the way around, and so it was kind of fun.
Did you have to
at the
take
time.
turns? Like, no, everyone would. Okay.
If you a shell, you're single seated. There's 8 of you in a boat, and you have one oar going out one side, one oar port and starboard, and you all have to row in unison. They always talk about teamwork and teams and all that, and because of crew, because everybody, the more you are in sync together, the faster the boat will go. If one person's out of sync, then the boat slows down.
Wow. Well, who's the most powerful rower? The person in the front or the pair of back?
So the person in the front is the stroke oar. He sets the pace. He or she sets the pace. And then the widest part of the boat is right after that. So we call that the engine room. So the bigger guys are in the middle there. So most of the time they're the stronger guys. And then as you get near the end, you need a lot more finesse because they're so far away from the beginning. They're watching.
Timing, yeah.
Yeah. And so you end up with lighter guys, but more finesse guys.
Were you
So-
engine?
Yeah. If you have no finesse, you're just pounding it out. You're in the engine room.
All right.
So
And
that's
then
where
how
I
do they
was.
steer? Who's the guy that's...
Coxswain, but I want to teach you everything, aren't you?
Listen, man, this is why you're here.
So I know this whole podcast. They're like, what are we talking about? The coxswain is the one who sits, a guy or a girl, has to weigh at least 140 pounds, 120 pounds. And they sit in the back and they have a little paddle, a little rudder in the very back of the boat. And they set the pace. They tell you when to go faster or slower. And they're the closest to that stroke oar, talking to them. And then they also can maneuver the boat a little bit. But I mean, shells are not meant to turn.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be a straight, they're 30 feet long. So
Sure.
they have a rudder that's very tiny.
Okay.
So it's just more for maneuvering at slow speed to get around something. But the races are 2,000 meters, hopefully straight line.
So you're in college and somebody introduced it to you, and then you got into it, and then you were coaching it when you were getting ready to
Yeah,
graduate?
so then there's high school teams in Seattle that because we're right on Lake Washington, and Lake Union, other places, and University of Washington is a huge powerhouse in crew. So there is a few high school teams, and so we started coaching that. My turn to be wife at the time, she and I met there in Seattle Pacific. At
After
crew.
you graduated high school?
No, while we were Seattle Pacific is another college I went to. I can't stick with one college. I went to like 3 or 4 before it was all over, but that was the last one.
Okay, is that where you graduated from?
Yeah, I think so. There should be a diploma somewhere with my name on it, but
So where do you went back to Seattle because that's where your family...
yeah, I
roots
kind
were?
of migrated back, went back to Seattle, and then I have my family has a big history at Seattle Pacific, but I said I'd never go there because the rest of my family went there, but there
You
I
ended up
ended up.
going there?
Ended up sucking myself back into that. And they had this crew thing, so I started that, and
How was it?
so coached it, and then I was thinking I was going to get into coaching, in high school and college and stuff, and then just kind of got enamored with joining the military.
Where you hadn't graduated from college yet then?
No, when I first started thinking about it, no, I was still in college.
So you got enamored with it in which way? I mean, was there a movie that you watched or?
I think the camaraderie was some of the things that I really loved about. I loved about crew, and I loved about coaching, and about that team concept. And the military is really big, and be part of something bigger than yourselves. When you live overseas a lot, you end up being the American voice in some cases because people don't know any other Americans. So whatever policy comes out of America, they turn to the American and go,
yeah.
"Why would you do that?" You're like, I don't know. It's the government. But you're the only American they know. So when I got, started thinking about it, I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. Love traveling. And so this gave me a great opportunity to do that. So that's what we did. That's what I did as I joined the frickin' Army. I am the poster child on how not to do it. Because I paid for my own college,
No kidding.
Then joined the Army, then became an officer, so that I don't need the government to pay for me. Of course not.
So
It's a dumb way of doing it, but anyway, that's how it worked out.
That is the dumbest way of doing it.
I know.
So, but when you did it, did you lose a bet or something? I mean, why did you go in the
I was
Army?
11, but yeah, instead of the Navy.
Yeah.
First, I can't my stomach will not take on oceans. I went in as 11 Bravo, which is an infantry guy.
Hold on. So you were in, just like Jesse.
Yeah,
and Howard.
airborne ranger option, went the whole 9 yards. Recruiter loved me.
So you graduated college and enlisted.
Yep.
Good
Went
Lord.
in as 11 Bravo PFC, private first class.
No kidding.
And the recruiter loved me. I'm sure I made his month for recruiting points because he got all those little, signed up for 5 years, did all that. Got to Fort Benning, Georgia, lovely Fort Benning. And halfway through, they offered me officer candidate school. So, and I was going to go to Fort Lewis as a Ranger battalion. So I was going to go back there. I left. My wife was still there, and she was a cop. She was a Pierce County police officer at the time. And so I was going to be, I'd be at Fort Lewis. It'd be perfect. I had a house. I would just drive down the road to work every day. Yeah.
Especially if you join the military because you want to travel.
Yeah. So then you learn these things called the needs of the Army. That's a great saying they try to do. Mm-hmm. And so the needs of the Army was not what I wanted, but what they wanted. So joined. So I stayed, became an officer candidate, and then they offered.
Was that in Fort Benning as well?
It's all at Fort Benning. That's one of the reasons they offered it is because it's right there at Fort Benning. And so I was selected, and then they said, "You're going to be a signal officer." And I said, "What the hell is that?" And they said, "Oh, it's radios and these new things called computers." I said, "Okay, don't know anything about either one of those."
But so they just randomly, the needs of the Army decided what you do because you weren't
You
coming
get a
in.
choice. You have 10 choices. They actually I think they laugh. They had 10 choices on which way you go when you come out of officer candidate school, and then they decide. Now, if you're officer candidates, if you're 10 years as an enlisted and you're an infantry guy, in most cases they're going to make you an infantry officer.
Sure.
But when I had only had a year or 2 years as an infantry guy, they had the need, and every next class could have a need for artillery officers, as the priority. So then they make everybody
Sure.
So the needs of the Army were signal at the time. So I became a signal officer.
How'd that work out?
Pretty good. Look where I am now, right? Only because of that am I where I'm at now, because I got into radios and then laptops, computers came around. And then at the end, by the end of my career, my 20 years career, we had servers in Stryker vehicles or in vehicles. So, we're running Unix and all the stuff out of the back of vehicles. So the transformation, of course, as the whole world is, transformation's huge, and especially in the military.
So, one could argue, I wouldn't trivialize your job as just making sure all comms were up, but we couldn't go into combat without.
So every combat unit has a signal officer.
Yeah.
So they run all the networking. You don't have everybody on one radio signal, right? You have multiple channels, and you're cross-connected with everybody else. And then you own all the repair guys and all the radio guys, and so it's it gets a little more complicated. And then when we got into servers, then you're running networks. So over air in the middle of the deserts.
What does Uncle Sam do to teach you all these things? Other than saying you're in charge of IT or whatever.
So they have a lot of great classes for smart people, and it's just not me. So all my stuff is OJT, on the job training.
Really?
I just learned, as you're going through it and doing it. And
Just a little nerdy.
I mean, and then things happen so fast that they would deploy things to the field before they really had time to train it. So you learn it as you go. And they do stuff on, and I also surround myself with a lot of smart kids. As I got older, they were kids. And so they're doing it, and I'm just managing the hoopla, and
So well, hold
you
on.
got this, buddy, right?
So
We're
you're
gonna
in.
fix this problem tonight.
So you get in though, and then you're in for a year or two. It sounds like before you decide to go the officer path. Right?
Yeah, so I did 11 Bravo. I consider this the most powerful corporal in the United States Army because you're at drill school. They keep you at drill school, and you become a corporal. And so everyone's screaming at ease, and because you're a drill, you're not a drill sergeant, but anyway, so you hang out there and help train troops until you get to go to OCS, and then you go on to become an officer.
So when you did that, what did you pick? Did you pick signal officer? Or did you
I
pick,
mean, it was out of the 10. There's probably three or I think it was like second or third.
what else? What were the other ones?
Well, infantry, because I was already an infantry guy. So I thought that would probably be the way I was going to go. And then, I don't even know if I had military intelligence because I know I'm not that intelligent.
I was like, you and intelligence the same. What? You
That's
think?
not going to work. I don't even hardly remember. I just remember Signal being a pretty big surprise. Like, really?
Okay, but you weren't upset.
I mean, you can be all upset all you want.
No, I get you.
Big A Army decides, that's what you're going to do. And
No, I'm
you
with you.
can't just say, I quit. That ain't going to happen. So.
You just ride
But
it out.
I kind of everybody goes to their strengths, right? And I felt my strength was more better served downrange than being in an office kind of environment. So I spent most of my career downrange. I was at brigades or lower combat units 90% of my career.
And what would you be doing floating in and out of those?
So I mean, again, as you move up in a bigger unit, you have more communication systems to deal with. And like in the very end, you're dealing with core size. So 10,000 people are deploying in the middle of nowhere, and you're setting that network up for those 10,000 people to talk over satellite, FM radio, AM radio, microwave, because we have, servers running. So all that networking has to be put together, and, what unit's going to do what and who has what equipment. And so that all falls into your signal planning as you work your way through it. One of my last things I did was Cobra Gold, which was a huge exercise we do in Thailand every year. And it's with the Marines and with the Navy, the Air Force, everybody joins. And then they go to Thailand and you do an exercise with the Thais. And it's all on paper, it's all, you don't really have an enemy to fight, right?
Yeah.
So you're doing all so Hawaii is the bad guys. So you have to have satellite imagery and stuff so the intel guys can be the bad guys. And then you're playing the good guys. Well, none of that works if you have no communications. So all these people fly there, and if the communications don't work, they're all standing around. So there's an exercise to them. It's real world for you.
Yeah.
So you learn a lot, get a lot of pressure and a lot of late nights trying to make sure everything works. Same thing as data centers. When data centers are up and running, that's all fun and games. And if they're not, thousands of people can't do any work because they're waiting on you to, get the gens running or whatever it is.
So what's the enlisted person like? If 11 Bravo is infantry, what was?
So we had 25 series, 25 Bravos, 25 Charlies. Those are then I'm talking about the Army.
Yeah. Are those like the IT guys? That
Yeah, they're the IT guys. Yeah, and you can join the Army and be an IT guy. They have that MOS all the time, and they're always looking for those guys. And they have a whole, you can make it all the way up to Sergeant Major, up to E9, through those MOSs of putting all that. And they're really, the military's communications and stuff is pretty sophisticated, as much as anywhere else. It's even harder because, like for Desert Storm or some of these old battles in history books now, but the whole army is in the middle of a freaking desert. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
So you can't run to go get parts or anything. You have to put it all on the ground. So nobody's talking to anybody unless you have your systems up.
So where were you at during some of those times? I mean, when did you get out of the Army?
06. I was in 86 to 2006. Like
And
20 years.
When you retired, were you a colonel?
No. I was prior service, so I retired as a major.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of got to the place I could have kept going, but I was like, you know what, I want to try something different. Again, my itchiness to try to do something out of always something different. So I had a chance to get out in '06, and Iraq was going on, but I was in Lewis, so I really wasn't heading that way. They didn't have any assignments going that way, so I thought it was a good time to pop. And then I ended up in Iraq as a contractor right afterwards anyway. So, but
So you were trying to avoid that, and then you ended up.
no, I wasn't trying to avoid it. I just thought it was a good time to move on, because if I would have been in a unit that was deploying, I never would have left it. I mean, I never am going to leave a unit as they're going into combat. That's just wasn't going to happen. But I wasn't really slated for any of that at the time, so I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to go, I might as well go.
What was some of the coolest things you did when you were in the Army?
I spent a lot of time in Special Forces. Jumped from a lot of great airplanes, and went to a few different countries. So those were all.
Was that awesome?
I spent time in Europe. We used to do with a tank battalion, and that ended up in Iraq at the time, and later, and we got lost from Germany to Iraq. But there's just I don't think anybody goes through a military career without seeing. Because they're always moving everybody. Every 3 years, either you're moving or your boss is moving every 18 months. So 3 years, you're going to Germany. 3 years, you're going to Italy or, U.S. or some other post. So I like travel. So I like the new cultures and changes. And
So where'd you end up?
So-
Like when you graduated from OCS, where'd they send you?
I went to Germany, and then, Fort Gordon, Georgia is home of the Signal Corps. So you went there for 6 months for training, and then end up in Germany in a tank battalion.
And you were married at the time. You have any
Married.
kids
No, we had no children.
yet? And she was a cop still, or?
She finally quit as we were going to get ready to move, and we were going to start a family, and so we went to Germany, and then just the wall fell. This is back in the 90s.
Oh, you there when the wall fell down, huh?
Yeah, I was when the wall fell down, and we were watching it, and then they started. Everybody's going home, right? We're sending units back to the States. It's all done. Then Iraq starts happening, right? Then Saddam starts raising his head, and so we end up in Iraq on Christmas Day. I flew into Iraq on Christmas Day and sent Kelly home with a newborn baby, and she spent a couple months at home. But
Back to Seattle, I guess.
yeah. But then spent all the Desert Storm with the tank battalion running through the desert. All funny.
Was that cool?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're in a Humvee, you're in a soft-shelled Humvee in their own tanks. So when they say they're going to run through the artillery and keep going, you're like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna, all that pinging you hear on the side of your tank goes right through a soft Humvee. So we're not going to do that. But yeah, I mean, you feel this camaraderie of this huge force going, and some, as things happen, people do get killed. So it isn't like it's all fun and games, but, at the time, it was something that I thought, needed to happen. And so it was, you feel you're on the right side of history at this thing
Sure.
as you go through it.
How long did it last? I mean,
Well, the actual battle, lasted only like a week and a half.
Yeah.
It was so fast. We were, nonstop for like 4 days with no rest. But then, but the whole thing was, and then we stayed another 5 months in the desert, making sure it stayed that way.
just to make sure that there was no.
Yeah, Saddam was still, again, we didn't go into Iraq. So at the time, George Bush Sr. had the coalition
Pushing him out of Kuwait.
out of Kuwait. Remember that? Yeah. So we were pushing him out of Kuwait, got to the border, and then Schwarzkopf and all these guys negotiated with Saddam, and he was killing Kurds and everyone else at the time. So his own people were trying to revolt. And again, years later, of course, if we would have taken care of it then, it would have been something different. But so we stayed on the border for about 5 months, and then we flew. Then we all finally got home.
And home was back in Georgia.
Germany at the time.
So you got to go back to Germany.
Yeah, and then we went across the U.S. Went to different units around the world.
How long were you stationed in Germany for?
3 years, just about 3 years. Most of the Army assignments are 3 years.
Did you ever go check out like the Berlin Wall after it went down?
Yeah. It was just falling down, so it was still a little hard to, but that was still going on, and we also had young kids, so we didn't get to travel as much as.
Sure.
Anyone who's got a 1-year-old knows you don't put them in a car for very long if you can help it.
Unless you're on the Autobahn, then you could go Mach
Yeah,
10.
you can, but still, a kid's just screaming.
No, I hear you. And then when was that your only overseas duty that we?
Went to Naples, Italy.
How was
Spent-
that?
that was working for NATO. So yeah, that was supposed to be, we're off at noon every day because it's hot. They don't have air conditioning in the NATO buildings. And then Sarajevo happened.
Oh,
So we ran 24-hour ops the whole time. And I spent 6 months in Sarajevo.
really?
So, I mean, that was definitely a coalition of a lot of people running around, doing things. So
And as a signal officer or signal
yeah,
corps?
again, you have Germans, Italians, Americans all putting their communication systems together to make them talk. It's as bad as trying to get Apple and Microsoft to work on the same OS at the same time. That doesn't always work very well.
Sure.
So
Sure.
we did all that, and then so then you got to keep that all systems up and running for all those guys.
Was that a cool job though? I mean, what did you learn?
Yeah.
What did you gain from that you were able to take with you into? what
Well,
you're
I
doing
mean,
now?
anytime you work with something outside your, you come up with a great plan, and then of course you have to change it.
Sure.
Right. So you're always trying to change or make something work that hasn't done before, and you're always trying to make it better, or make it so that for them it's just your senior leadership is trying to get something accomplished, and sometimes they'll come up with ideas that that you have to figure out how to make it work. They as in typical, a lot of people don't understand IT, don't understand radios, but they are in charge, and so they want things to work, just like data centers. They
Like
want to
magic.
build. It's like magic. So either you make it magic happen, or you try to work around so that it looks like the magic's happening.
Sure. It's that's the most stressful part, right? Is when you have someone that's in charge asking for or they have unrealistic expectations, I should say, because they simply don't understand what it takes to bring something to life sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to be where you have to teach them what's realistic, or they stretch you too. You haven't thought of it, and they didn't.
Challenge you.
They just came up with this idea. So why can't we make it happen? And until you absolutely say it can't work, you defy physics or something, then
It's true.
try it out.
There's benefits to that, having someone that scratch the paint with you all the time. But when you so you did Sarajevo and you did Kuwait, and then what else?
For combat tours, those I did. That was then I was in Bosnia for a little while too, because there was a little spillover from that.
Sure.
So we spent a little time in Bosnia.
Where were you on like September 11th? How about that?
I was sitting out in Fort Lewis, Washington, out in the middle of on an exercise in the woods,
Really?
and yeah, we had heard F-16 screaming over our heads, and because they're coming out of Portland, and
Really?
you're like, yeah, they are the air cap for the West Coast, so they were breaking the sound barriers, screaming up here, and we were like, what's going on?
That'd been awesome though. I mean, I was at Camp Pendleton like
Oh.
a few days after,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of show of force. A lot of really cool maneuvering that you'd get to see from the planes. But more importantly, like coming off of if you were standing on like Assault Craft Unit 5, which is right along Interstate 5,
Yeah, yeah,
north to
yeah.
south, and if you were standing there, you would see a whole fleet of like 50 helicopters, different types coming in formation, because they were obviously working on patterns and stuff. But man, if you're not seeing those things, it's so impressive to see the power of American military, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you lock down all those bases. We just happened to be on base at the time. So, but guys were stuck alongside the freeway trying to get on base for hours, and literally
Even if they
12
were
hours.
so
Yeah,
even
because they, right after 9/11, we thought we didn't know what was
put a
going
hold on
right?
everything.
Yeah, the planes were being grounded. We didn't know where the attacks were, so they just shut every base down. And
Interesting.
so it was kind of a tough one for a
I didn't
while.
realize they shut the bases down.
Well, I say they closed the gates, and you had to go through full opening of the trunks and going through your car and everything
Sure.
else. So that would take 10 minutes a car.
Yeah.
You have 1,000 cars lined up. You're going to be there hours before you get in the gate. But
Interesting.
it was all an interesting time, and then of course then we figured out what was going on, and then it was deployed around the world or wherever we were going to be. So.
Did you end up getting deployed as a byproduct of that?
No, again, that was kind of the end of my career. So now that was September 11th, 2002.
So you were with the
And
combat
then
unit.
2006, Fort Lewis was more looking towards Korea. and we're defending
Sure.
of the Asia side. So they were trying to keep those guys in place so that you didn't want to pull all your troops towards, and then leave Asia wide open. So stayed there pretty much the last 3 or 4 years of my career, and then once I retired, then I ended up as a contractor and went over there in Iraq and did a year over there.
Well, where were all like? So did you have a kid born in every country type of thing?
So yeah, for a while, every time we moved, we got another child. I was like, man, we got to stop this.
Stop
So
moving?
I have 3 girls. First one was born in Germany. Second one was born in Monterey, California, and then the third one was born in Seattle.
So what was in
about-
Monterey? What was that duty station?
That was Fort Ord, California. That used to be a big base. There was probably about 6 years there that I never got transferred off of base. It closed around me. So as in Germany, we all started closing down all the bases, and I was like one of the last guys out of there.
Really?
Moved to Fort Ord, Light Infantry Battalion. Spent 3 years there, and then Fort Ord was decommissioned, and it started to implode. They shut all the units down.
Interesting. And
So when we were shutting down, the Army and everyone's going through these, we didn't need as many units. The Cold War was supposedly over, and we don't need everybody in Germany. We don't need all those units there, and we don't need all these units in America. So we can have less battalions, less infantry, less armor.
is this like the first stage of sequestration? Is that what that was?
Probably, yeah. Then they came up with the base closures after that. That was, more emotional, more political. You can shut an army, the Army, Navy, they can shut units down if they, the manpower is how they don't want it to be or whatever. They can change. But shutting a base down is really political,
Oh, for sure.
Because so many people work there from the state and Congress gets involved and all that stuff.
So along this whole time, what were you learning the most when you were in the Army? I mean, obviously leadership stuff, but from a technology perspective, do you feel like you were you up to speed as everything was evolving?
No. I mean, it's like saying, are you up to speed on all technology today? I mean, it's so big. There's so many different aspects that you could. I mean, I was for my little slice of the world of radios and satellite communications and all that stuff. I was pretty much on top of what was going on there. Servers were so brand new, and they were starting to come in, and especially deployable servers out into combat vehicles and stuff. That was something. We brought in contractors to help out with that, and then running. It isn't any good just to have a computer there. You have to be able, or a server there. You have to be able to pass the information. So you have fiber, tactical fiber, which you hadn't used before, and then you got to have microwaves or satellite to shoot to your next, so the other guys know what's going on as well. So there's a lot of aspects.
But that sounds like if you guys are rolling that out for combat, you guys are probably getting not headline privileges, but you were seeing things early.
Yeah. We were getting some new stuff, and it's kind of like you can use your backbone, your road for a lot of things. When they built the roads in the 1920s or something, they didn't know they had Ferraris would run on them. They just knew there'd be a road, and
Sure.
so you're getting the road down, kind of like what we do with data centers now. We don't know what's going to be in the future for data centers, but we're setting that path there for
Future
the next
proofing.
generations to come and other, technology.
What was the coolest thing you learned in all that IT stuff?
I don't know I love I just love the whole aspects of bringing it all together, between the satellite communications to the servers to the, to the radios and bringing it all into one system. We break it up in the civilian world now. We have people that just do fiber. They just do background stuff.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is when you left the Army, what made you have that skill set that said, I'm going to go work for this contractor and I'm going to go back to Iraq? And why did you do that versus knowing that you lived in like the headquarters of one of the largest tech companies, or a few of them based in 2006?
Well, I didn't think I would have anything to do with software or with the companies because, they're software, right? Microsoft software. That's what everybody knows them for. They don't know them for construction or anything else, right? At the time. And same thing with Apple or all of them. They're all software companies. So if you're a software writer, which I am not, or, then I could see a future. But I didn't see, and maybe I'm just too short-sighted. All I could see with those guys is I'm not a software guy. So I have no no reason to, even apply for those kind of jobs. And Iraq, well, I mean, what worked for his contracting for me was your skill sets, right? You're used to being deployed. You're used to, if there's incoming, you're used to that, or you're not going to freak out, and you're used to working 12-hour days in a cramped environment or whatever, and sleeping in hooches, and you're just more used to it than a civilian person who's never been in the military would be.
Yeah.
So the skill set worked really well. And my job there was I was liaison to the Secretary General of Communications. So we went in there and set up their version of the Pentagon. So they have a civilian side and a military side. So they had the military guys walking side by side with the Iraqi military. So on the civilian side, they wanted people to be their liaisons. So they ended up getting a bunch of retired military guys. And then, so now you're a civilian. And now you're walking along with them, helping them set up what, a communication school so they can teach communication to the guys, and buying radios, and, just setting up an army because they had, didn't have much at the time. Either we destroyed it or it was so old and, that was no good. And, when I first got there, they're using walkie-talkies and so on, and all the bad guys would just listen in so they could hear what the guys were saying as they're maneuvering. So
Really?
they didn't have any any kind
When
of
you got there as a
encryption.
civilian, you mean?
Yeah, when I got there as a civilian.
Because that was what, right, late 06, 07?
Oh, yeah, '06. Yeah. I mean, the Iraqi military was still just starting to stand up. Remember, they came in there and they wiped out the Iraqi military. We won the war, and then they said, okay, we're not going to have a military anymore. So they sent all those people home, which is, the history books is very controversial on should they have done that. They let all these young guys with no pay go home, and then they sat there and they said, this sucks. I can't even feed my family. So they became insurgents.
Yep.
So you're kind of, anyway, so we started rebuilding that. We gave them Humvees and we gave them some radios, and but then they had to start using those things and understanding that. And they're used to using walkie-talkies. It's a lot easier, but they have to understand that the bad guys are listening to you talk. So when you say everybody meet over here, well, they're going to meet you there too with a bunch of bullets.
So when you got out and you retired, how long? I mean, did you already have that job lined up before you got out?
No, I was like on terminal leave. So the Army has, your vacation pay.
Sure.
I was burning up vacation pay. Didn't really know what I was going to do.
How much terminal leave did you have?
I think the most you can have in the military is 90 days.
Really?
That's the most you can carry over. Maybe it's 60 days.
I thought it
was
was
like,
more than that.
No,
I could
they
be
only
wrong.
allow you, you have a use or lose up to so much. I think it was 90 days.
So you had 90. It sounds like you.
Yeah, so you pretty much check out 90 days ahead of if you've saved up as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then, so you're really out of the military, but you're still
Getting paid, benefits are
right.
covered.
You're still getting all that for the next 90 days, and then
Sure.
you're done. So I happened to get this job offer right after I got started. So I literally landed in Kuwait my last week of terminal leave. So I was double dipping for like a week.
That's kind of cool.
And then,
Who was it? Are you allowed to say, or you mentioned
well,
this government contractor?
it used to be called MPRI, which was an old consulting company by a bunch of ex-military officers who I think it got bought out by, L3 Communications.
But it was focused on like communications.
No, it was. They were focused on professional development of foreign countries' military. So they'd hire ex-colonels and generals and other people and to teach around the world skill sets learned in the U.S. military.
Sure.
Hopefully friendly armies, but anything from military intel. And the U.S. government's always putting out contracts. And this happened to be one of the big contracts. Of course, at the time, Iraq was the biggest thing going on. So there was not only logistics for our troops, but also how do we stand up the Iraqi so they can stand on their own so we can get the heck out.
Sure.
And so that was just one of their contracts that they had was helping
Transitioning veterans.
Yeah, and helping their Pentagon stand up and learn to be, because Saddam would just make rule, just say, okay, we're going to do this, and the generals would go do it. There's no Pentagon.
Yeah.
There's no budget. There's none of that. So now when you give people votes and generals are making votes and making decisions, totally rocks their world. Changes good or bad. So we're trying to advise them on the best. And of course, a lot of it was our money too. U.S. government gives the Iraqi money to spend, but let them decide how it's going to be spent. So, you just
Interesting.
crawl, walk, run,
So
all those things.
So when you got out, you went over there. You were telling me an interesting story that you check into the base, but you're technically still.
Oh, yeah. So my ID card, I had a contractor ID with the same social. So when they zipped it in to say I'd arrived, they're keeping track of everybody. It went back to Army Finance, and they called my wife and said, "Hey, we're going to pull your husband's retirement because we heard, we find out he deployed, and we don't, we want to pay him combat pay." They thought they lost it or something. And so she had to explain, no, he's retiring. Because, the Army, you never mess with your pay. Once you get going to one bank account, you never mess with it the whole time you're in. Don't touch your pay. So anyway, they finally figured it out.
And don't over celebrate because they will eventually overpay you on accident.
They pay you a nickel more than you're supposed to. Within about 5 years, somebody will catch it.
And they'll scoop it right out.
Scoop it all out at one shot.
There were guys I served with that they, I think they just thought it was like, man, I won the lotto. Like I got overpaid. It was awesome. Blah 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 blah. And then they're out partying and pissing all away. And then they get told, hey, you're not going to get paid again for the next 2 months because we're going to catch
Well, it's
up.
good if you're single, right? You live in the dorms or in the barracks, and
eating at the chow hall.
Yeah, eating the chow. You don't care. Okay, you don't get any pay. But if you got a family, then it's like, now you guys got problems with mama ain't got no money for the next month because y'all got the extra $500 for 3 months or something.
Sure.
No pay due.
I'll tell you,
So.
there was a guy that I served with. He definitely tried to live by the way it was designed, right? So he marched to chow hall for all of his meals. He only used the gym on base. I mean, like everything, because it's in theory, it's all provided by you.
Sure.
You don't need, in theory, you don't need much. And he lived by that. And I mean, I envied it in some ways because he was just creating a platform of stability, I guess, for himself. But there's no way he had as much fun as I did.
I had a guy working in Iraq as a contractor he was the joke is he would take anybody's old T-shirts or anything, and he never spent a dime. And he was there 5 years as a contractor in Iraq, and he went to Thailand and went to Vietnam and bought a resort.
I was like a whole village.
Yeah, he had like $750,000 cash.
Yeah.
Because he never used a nickel, and took it all, and now he lives in Vietnam. But yeah, I mean, it's how disciplined you are.
You could work the system, I guess, is what I was saying.
That's
right. There was always some people that were working the system better than others, right? And then, but that's awesome. So you came out, you went to work for this company. It sounds like they got sucked up by level 3, you said, and then you were there. How long were you in Iraq for?
I'm only good for about a year in these things. When you're working 12-hour days and all that, the problem. I mean, to me, the problem with contracting is there's no future in it. You could do it as long as you want to keep doing just that job, but you're not going to move up to another position or, there's no, that's the job. And you get paid really well. So do it and like it, or do it or move on. And so near the end of it, I was ready to move on. And so I just started throwing my resume out there, and it got to some guys at Microsoft because I had some friends from, military guys. And they passed it around, and
is this like in 2007, 2008?
Yeah. So I'll do my shout out to Mr. Ford. So Steve Ford got my resume. He was working at Microsoft, and Bill Gates had his big epiphany that this internet thing's taken off, and we got to get involved. And we're not going to send disks out for updates anymore. We're going to get on this internet. So we need a data center. So then Microsoft started scrambling to build a data center, and so we did it in Quincy, just down the road from Redmond, Washington, or in Eastern Washington, where electricity is cheap. And so he was trying to put a team together. So he got my resume, and then his story is he called me in Iraq, and I was really belligerent. Like,
I believe it.
I
don't
can't
know why.
believe he's like, I can
see it.
I acted like I really didn't want the job, and I was bothering him. And
how did he find you?
How would I do that? So we had a mutual friend.
Okay.
Ex-military guys, and I put my resume in. He goes, "Hey, I should send it to you, Microsoft guy." And I said, "I'm not a software guy." Again, my software thinking. I don't know what I would do at Microsoft. I don't write software. So what they were looking for, and Steve is a military guy.
Was he Army?
He's an Army guy. He's a
reservist?
reserve colonel, or he's retired now, but he was reserve. civil affairs guy, and he was looking to build a team to build data centers, but he also needed someone to herd cats, pretty much. You know, the PM
Was Steve
role.
like the HMFIC, I guess, at the time?
He was the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, there was hardly anything of our construction in Microsoft except like 3 guys.
And at the time, what did you guys have? You guys had a data center or two
That's it.
in Washington?
We had leased. They had, and I don't know all of them. There was a few lease sites, but like our Hotmail back in the 90s. Well, I mean, Hotmail's still there, but back in the day it was in a lease site just
Like-
down the road.
Like a digital, or was it a co
No. That I don't even think
Just
those
say-
guys.
Okay.
It was in a warehouse / turned into a data center. It was a local company. Yeah, there was before any of these big companies exist, Cyrus One or any of the other ones we can talk about. But before they even existed,
You were all on-prem.
we were pretty much on-prem or just off in this warehouse somewhere else, and it was run by our local guys, and every Hotmail account would connect back to that data center.
Was that the main pent-up demand for that data center? Was Hotmail?
The one I know about was mostly, but I mean, there's other data centers that are doing on campus that are doing all the software computing and all the work to build software. But for services, little I know about is, that was really, off-prem was, and they bought Hotmail. Hotmail was a something invented by another company, and then Microsoft bought it.
Gotcha.
So they brought that in, and then when Bill Gates said that, this internet thing's really going to take off, and others got involved, and then they said all their programs had to be able to work on the internet and be more than one location. That caused a huge revolution in Microsoft thinking and development.
Tell us that story you'd once shared with me. How I guess he would just
Bill Gates.
Yeah,
So Bill Gates every year, this is before, back in the 90s way before I was there, but he would go every year, he'd go off in the woods to, just read white papers and think quietly with no other distractions on where he wanted that company to go, even when it was a lot smaller. And so it was known every April or something, he would take 2 weeks or so
by himself.
By himself.
No, wife, no kids,
No.
Just go and be alone with his thoughts.
Just in the woods. I kind of think of some log cabin in the middle of nowhere. I have no idea where it was.
You ever watch the Unabomber?
That's
Take
right,
It Easy?
yeah.
That's what I think of.
No, he's probably, I think he's a little softer than that. I'm sure. Yeah. He probably had a lot of support staff but he would just read papers, and out of that would come his thoughts. He'd write his own white paper that would go out to the rest of Microsoft and say, Microsoft wasn't as huge. For years it was like 10,000 people or so. Just
That's still
the bosses.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, but not. I mean, now they're 180,000.
Holy cow! But that's pretty. That's pretty. I like that method where he just took himself off grid with all the data that he could, the meaningful data that he could use, and then he sat down and he just analyzed and interpreted that data until he knew exactly how to pivot the business. That's pretty gangster.
Yeah, and he was, sure he had a lot of people that would help him develop what white papers he was going to read, but he'd come up with, these are the important ones that I really wanted to think about and decide on. And those are the ones. It wasn't like one. It was like 50 or 60, because he's even now he'll put out his book list and stuff. He reads constantly. So he would read through all that and make his own notes. And then when you're the CEO and owner and founder of the company,
Sure.
Whatever he says is kind of the way you're going to go. So away they go. And that was when the whole thing was pivoting, and we got to get into this data center. We got to get into this this stuff.
But that was really like, hey, there's going to be this cloud.
No, it was more like, this is the internet. We got to figure out how we're going to, it's going to go around the world, and we're not going to have to send a disk out for updates anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to do all that. You remember those early
Sure.
things everybody had to do, and, everyone's going to get on it, and we'll be able to reach all these people. And then out of that came cloud computing as a whole nother, I don't know if he came up with that one, or I know he didn't come up with it, but I don't know if he made those decisions or was he already gone by then. But Azure then shifted to this cloud computing that came years later. But first it was just, there was just because, we were all on dial-up.
Yeah.
Everybody was on dial-up and early, and you could finally start getting to people that were.
So when Steve, though, you guys had a mutual friend and you were in Iraq as a contractor, I guess, and
Yeah.
he was looking for full-time employees or a contractor?
Contracting. I mean, we were looking for guys to do help out with these data centers.
But what was he,
And,
because back then they weren't really even probably called, I mean, they were data centers, but they weren't quite like we see data centers now, right? So,
Oh no, we still have an operation. This is one of our big data centers.
so when you started working for Microsoft, was this before the Kevin Timmons did like the coupe?
Oh, way before that.
Really? Okay.
They
So,
were one of our very first. We built two of them exactly the same. One in Quincy, one in San Antonio.
so,
And,
so can I ask a nerdy question? I know I'm all over the place here, but it's the bourbon. So bear with me.
it's your podcast, bro. I'll just, I'll go anywhere we're going.
So when you first talked to, it was Steve Ford, do you still keep up with him?
Yep, he and I talk every once in a while. He's running around the East Coast with another company not to be named,
Sure.
but no, he's doing well. He's
Is he still up in that same region? I mean,
no,
covers
he's
the-
East Coast.
He is.
Yeah, he owns the whole Eastern region.
Oh,
He's
wow.
doing a
So
lot
he
of
had to relocate?
A lot of data centers. I don't know. I think he flies over there.
I got you.
Airplanes work real good.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
So when he talked to you, did you interview with anybody else?
Yeah, actually, there was a hospital that was looking for a data center administrator or data center operations guy in Bremerton, Washington, right out where we talked about before. And they interviewed me too. And I always told them I'm the most interesting interview you have because literally they were calling me on a cell phone and I had helicopters flying over. I was in the green zone and I'd say, hold on. And they're all freaking out thinking I have incoming fire. And so, they had a system where all inside the green zone, which is around where the embassy was, they had cell phone service and it was a direct line to New Jersey. So your cell phone, you had a New Jersey phone number, but the government was running the satellite over
So that
there.
no one had
So
to pay long distance. To
nobody
call
paid
you.
long distance. No one connect. I could talk to my family off, a New Jersey phone call.
That's awesome.
So
So when I meant, did you interview with anyone else? Like, how many of the people that you interviewed with when you were trying to get on with Microsoft are still at Microsoft?
Oh yeah. So when I finally got home, I had to do 8 hours interview, which was extremely painful. I thought it would be a little more fun than it was, but
Was it in Redmond where you had?
yeah, it was like an hour for 8 different guys, so 8 hours, and I was like, you tell the same stories after a while, and Microsoft does it's probably a great idea. You don't interview with just the person or just the group that you'd work with. You interview with other people. Like you might have a software guy interview you because he's looking at another perspective, and you might have a engineer, a data center design engineer talking to you and talk about design a little, and they all get different perspectives, and then the hiring manager sees their perspectives and gets their comments, and then he can decide on if this person is, what you thought he was, and he could have answered all the right questions for you, but then somebody else brought up something that gave you pause or made you even more interested in the guy or whatever, or girl. So, you hit it from different perspectives. So they try to hit you with 5 or 6 different interviews when you do it.
Was that more to see if it was a cultural fit? Like you ever?
Maybe. I mean, a little bit. I'm thinking about it as I do it now. Now I'm on the other side of the fence, right? We do a little bit of culture. You see how you're going to get along with the team, but also to see how well-rounded you might fit somewhere else too. I mean, you might not fit exactly what I need, but the data center engineering team might absolutely love you and go, dude, I just interviewed this guy and we need to pull them in, and I'll say, hey, he's not right for me. And so they go, well, hey, can I have him? And so, they get slid over there. So it's also share the wealth, but it's also to give the hiring manager has the final say, but the hiring manager gets input from all these different people. And to get away from the group think, and the mindset that we're, all doing is talking about construction, you get a few other people talking, or their thoughts, you get a better perspective on the person, or you hear things that you didn't even think about asking that, hey, by the way, this guy has this degree, in this engineering. Did you even know that? And he goes, no, I didn't even brought it up.
Interesting.
So
So who is still there that you may have interviewed with?
not many, not many. I mean, there's some great Americans. Kevin Williams, another one, and Sean James are the two that I can think of that have been there almost from the very beginning.
Now,
From
Sean James is the guy that does he's the
he's
submarine
he's
data
an
center.
R&D guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, he like he says, he sits around, smokes a bowl, and thinks about new ideas on.
but he's
It's
a
the
Navy
best.
nuke. Is that what he
Yeah,
was?
yeah, old Navy boomer. So
Okay.
he was one of the very early ones that think about putting servers in a submarine, but now it's in a chamber
Right.
and
And
put
he's
it in
buried
the water.
right?
Yeah,
How's
yeah.
it working out?
I just see every once in a while they've run with it. It's gone. They did like a 2-year study on it, and
That'd be kind of a cool program. I mean, I don't know how
well, they
efficient.
wanted to keep going, like use wave technology to make energy. They have devices that will use the wave up and down to work a chamber to make electricity. So they were thinking about that, and also when you get off the coast, you can get off the coast and not hit taxes from different countries or states, and you could, if you're 20 miles off a coast, and you could also move it into
International
places.
territory.
Yeah, you could also move it to a place where it needs an event for Olympics, and you need all this computing power for the Olympics, but then afterwards you don't really need it. So you could bring it in for the Olympics and then move it back out. And,
Okay, so that's
they talked about putting servers on boats and other stuff. This was just a way of cooling it easier.
I think that there's. I was reading some publication, maybe Data Center Frontier. I think, but it was talking about a group in like Singapore, maybe that was doing stuff on ships. And,
See, in Singapore, small island,
yeah.
crazy hard land, and so anything off the coast would work out, twice as much as Hong Kong or any of these other countries.
What about was Christian Blotti there when you?
Christian was, yeah, Christian's, but he's been, he's big research and development guy from way back.
He's probably if he's been there that long.
I was just thinking about guys who are in actual construction part of it, but yeah, Christian has been very much involved in the industry from
Sure.
from the very beginning of it. So he's definitely led the way we've gone in builds and in computing and everything else.
So so you were there when they didn't have that big of a footprint on
No.
data centers, and then now they're one of the biggest, right?
Yeah, so I used to go to all the data centers. I knew all the guys. I used to fly around the U.S. and Europe or whatever and see them all. And then now we've been overcome by events, and now we have literally hundreds of people. You couldn't get to them all
Sure.
across the U.S. and Asia and Europe and everywhere else. So, there's I think they said they hired 500 people in the last couple months just for our construction site or our
For
CLNA.
real.
Yeah,
That's
we've really
FTEs or
blown out.
contractors?
No, FTEs.
Because that's
We've kind of gone away from vendors.
Really?
So vendors were a lot. Google, everybody used to have a lot of vendors and not many FTEs, right? And then I think there was a big lawsuit in the 90s or something, and said you're treating these contractors like employees, but they don't get any benefits of an employee.
sure.
So everybody's changed now to really pulling everybody in. And, they find out, especially a software guy, he has keys to the kingdom. You have him working all these years as a contractor. He's done all the software for you. He knows where all the dirty laundry's been, and
Yeah.
all the skeletons are. And now within minutes, he no longer works for you, works for somebody else. So they're like, man, we got to have a little more control, I think. So,
So that's what made them FTEs.
yeah, I mean, other companies, even down to their security and their maintenance guys, everybody's a FT. They don't have any contractors do anything.
'Cause it's all proprietary data that they're trying to protect.
And just everything. They just want to bring it on, and then everybody gets the same health benefits. And you got to say this about software companies: they going over and above on benefits. They have the best healthcare and the best. They really try hard. I mean, at least Microsoft tries unbelievably hard to make everybody's comfortable and want to stay there. I mean, it's overwhelming sometimes the amount of benefits. I try to bitch about it, but I can't. I mean, healthcare is great, and they'll help you with lawyer fees if you need help with something.
For real?
They have adoption stuff, all sorts of of things, that you never even heard of. That if you have to go on a trip last minute and you have no one to take your child, you can go with them. Microsoft will pay for you to take your child with you, or they'll pay for babysitters if you have to work late.
For real?
It's all sorts of like, really?
That's pretty cool. So, was Microsoft one of the originators of like giving you guys a restaurant in your buildings and feeding
I
you
don't
for
know.
free?
No, I think, Google. I think Google and those guys have it like this: free food for them.
Oh, for sure.
And we don't have that. But the last thing I need is more food. But they pay me good enough. I can buy my own sandwich. But they all, because they get tired of people driving off, and then, it also helps the company. If you have enough people, you want to
Keep
keep
them there,
everybody on
production.
campus. Yeah,
Yeah,
it turns
productivity.
into a 20-minute or a 2-hour lunch. So, but they do an outstanding job.
Tell me a cool
It's kind of
story.
like the military, somewhat. They try to be. The military has, your own
Quality of life.
own quality of life, and has your own food places. To keep everybody there, and
Yeah.
everybody goes back to work, and
That's so
so
true.
it's it's a nonstop kind of deal.
When you started with Microsoft, you were a contractor for how long?
Yeah, I say there's claw prints or nail prints as they drug me into Microsoft at the time, because I love being a contractor. So I was like almost 8 years.
What do you
working
like
as a
about it?
contract. Just totally independent. You're on project, you get paid, you'll take care of your health care. And again, because I was retired military, as we always say, the
Yeah.
best part of your retirement is your health care.
Sure.
The amount of money that families have to pay for health care, independently Cobra and all that, is just unbelievable, that we get for free in the military. And you're retired, you get it for free, so.
So being a contractor made a lot of sense if you retired because you have the
Yeah,
health care.
I have health care. I don't have to worry about that.
Were you
It's-
standalone? Like, were you just a contractor? Like,
No, I work
Wild
for a
Bill
company.
Enterprise? Okay, so
Yeah, Microsoft doesn't really like, or doesn't, they don't want to have all these single contracting companies out there. They want to have bigger companies that bring in a lot of people at once. There just gets to be too many. So I work for another company, but it was a great contracting gig. And then, I just like doing it, and I could work on the projects. And then it just got to be where they're bringing everybody in. And so I hung out as long as I could. And then I came into Microsoft, and so it was all good. Yeah.
you happy that you made the change?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can't, probably I got away with a lot of things early on in our development of these, our construction, that isn't allowed now. That's
Like
all the
what?
finance guys will tell me, just working so many hours in a week and flying to different places. And it's just a lot more. They have guys on site, you don't have to fly to another site. And, that drives me nuts. I always like going to the,
You wanted to
jumping
see
around.
them.
I want to see them, and and things are slow. I want to go to another site and work over there for a while,
Sure.
come back. But we have our sites are getting so big. It used to be there were 20 megawatts or less, and now we're having 60 at a shot, going up. And so there's a lot more work going on. So you really need somebody there.
What do you think is some of the crazy things that are driving the industry in that way?
There's a never ending need, right? You and I didn't grow up with a phone in our hands, saving 700 pictures of the same thing, that you share with other people who save another 700 of the same thing. So the need for data just keeps exploding. Internet of Things.
Sure.
Now our freaking refrigerators are connected in. So that need keeps getting bigger. And then I think the Fortune 500 companies and a lot of the companies have bought in to I'm not a data center company. I'm not a server company.
So
I
the
don't want to
outsourcing
run
model.
that. I want to make Coca-Cola. I don't make servers. So you do the servers, I'll do the Coca-Cola, and away we go. And I think more and more companies, and they're getting used to that, just paying rent. It's all financial driven somehow, but buying millions of dollars worth of servers and replacing them all the time and keeping it up 24/7, or just pay rent.
Yeah, just
And
have
it's
it on
and
demand.
by the way, you're geographically diverse. You have all your data will be backed up somewhere else, so you don't have to own 2 or 3 data centers.
So did they, when you were there and you were watching this whole evolution, this massive shift take place,
Yeah.
was there anybody that they had their fingers on it at the earliest stages that said, hey, listen, we need to brace ourselves because Azure is launching, or arbitrarily, but like
Yeah.
look, the adoption of X will be huge now because of
Yeah, no, I
video
think
streaming. I don't know.
I don't know if there's any one thing. I mean, I think a lot of people were looking. We have, I just call them all our black magic, um, smoke and mirrors guys that are looking at projections, trying to figure out how many megawatts we're going to need in the next quarter, the next year, and that goes off sales and everything else going on. But like you don't know what Xbox is going to produce or what their Christmas release is and how many more subscribers they're going to need, and so they're going to need all this more data center space. I mean, it all trickles down.
Sure.
Every new device, every new thing causes more data to be needed. Every new customer, and as we expand, we talked a little about the government's getting into it, so it keeps getting bigger and bigger as we keep needing more and more bandwidth for all these. And we in America, we think everybody's connected all the time and all that, but lots of Africa and Asia and Europe still have no internet or have very little, and they're not even close to being connected and having the amount of data downloaded as we do.
Really?
So, I think the data center use worldwide is like 8% or something. Compared
Really?
to, yeah. I mean, we're all connected, but when you get, there's swaths, the whole continent of Africa, except for certain places, the capital cities, but you
pretty
get
epic.
outside, have nothing.
That's not bad.
So, that's, of course, where the low orbiting satellite, Elon Musk and Google and other people are getting into it. They're trying to bring the masses in so that they can get to the internet and get to that knowledge and, all our schools that are online. They want to bring all this in, and that just takes more and more bandwidth and more servers and more, processing speeds. And so we're in a booming industry. We're in the right place.
So, and you guys are FamGuy. I mean, you guys are, one of the biggest players in FamGuy. So with that end, watching this massive explosion that you guys do, and then this big company that you guys were in, like you said, when you were trying to look into it, and you're like, I'm not a software guy.
Yeah.
Now, what is Microsoft in terms of, they're not just a software company anymore, obviously, right? They create hardware, and they're a data center and a cloud company and all those other things that are in the middle, right? But
yeah.
what do you see, what do you see that has been the greatest change for you in that time since that evolution? Because you've seen some massive shifts.
Well, I think, for the company itself, they've really, Steve Ballmer told a story that he went out to Quincy and called his dad and said, no, we're a real company. Because his dad always said, oh, you guys do software. You're not a real, manufacturing. You manufacture software, which is digits. There's not real.
Oh, wow.
And so he was out there and like, no, we got a real data center. This is where we're really manufacturing.
Yeah,
And so that's been a huge shift on the amount of buildings and how they've got involved. But, and it's really gotten away from software guys. I mean, that's still the core. That's where the money is. And Microsoft will always be there for that. But for our side of the house, all the critical environments and all these things we've had to add in to keep, the second and third order effects, keeps getting bigger and more demand. And so they have to deal with, where are we getting these skill sets? And our operations teams has had to, gone from one data center to hundreds, and, the thousands of guys running 24/7 operations has blown operations to a huge size of force. And during like COVID, those guys are still working 24/7 and sleeping in data centers and doing all those things. So it's been an interesting shift to watch all these, almost to a manufacturing on our side, because to keep a data center running, you got to have all those guys working together. And, they can't go home at night, where a software guy can work his hours and go home. I keep picking because I'm picking on software guys, but.
Sure. But you guys have, in addition to all that stuff, because you have grown and exploded into such a massive data center presence, there's a lot of pressure from groups like you to have a really strong commitment to sustainability, as an example.
Yeah. I think that's turned into, I think a lot of software companies, or a lot of these IT companies have got into sustainability and green and what can we do to help save this planet?
Less water.
So, so we're tracking all our we used to flush 100,000 gallons a day in some of our data centers. And now it's all recycling. It's all coming back and being used again. It's just the amount of sustainability has really gone up. We now own we built recycling plants at our data centers, and the first one's just opening, and they're taking all because the servers are only good for 4 or 5 years, depending on how long they want to use them for. And then so we're at millions of servers that are going to come offline
every few years.
And so, now they're going to tear them all down and take the chips out of them, take the metals out of them, and recycle them to the right places instead of just sending them where they could end up in a landfill or something. So it's been interesting to watch.
Can they recycle some of those materials? I know they could smelt like the metals and stuff like that, but what about like the microchips? Do they?
Yeah, I think chips don't always burn up. After 2 or 3 years, the hard drives and some of the fans might be all used up, but the chip is still somewhat newer
so they could
technology.
Still find some value in it.
Yeah, so they can reuse. I don't know if we reuse them in our servers, but second and third tier
there's
servers,
definitely an
I would
aftermarket
think.
for it.
Yeah, there's a huge aftermarket to use them again.
Especially if you're a group that's just burning through those things like a miner of some kind or something.
Right. So they'll use those and use chips and motherboards and all that other stuff. So, and then once you start doing that, people come up with more and more uses for that. When there was no material to use, no one really thought about how could we use it. But now you get the mindset of what can we do with this? And, people come up with, well, damn, we could take this motherboard and use it for this instead and recycle the whole thing.
So you get to Microsoft, you get in the industry, you're loving the data center stuff, you're just liking what you're doing, but what else are you learning about the ecosystem? Because by then, I don't remember when we met. What did you say, 7, 8 years ago maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, it's been a while. You were working it.
Was it CyrusOne maybe, or I was at Nova?
I think you're Nova.
Okay. And it's probably you and Kent. Were you and Kent?
Yeah, good old Ken Anderson.
You guys were piecing
Shout
carrots.
out.
Yeah.
So he was running around. He was doing a lot of construction. I was doing we have a group that takes the data center and turn it into Microsoft data center. So we bring in the network systems that are unique to us specifically compared to just a building. So I'm not always involved with installation of the building itself, but more of the IT side of the house, bringing in our own networking, our own DAS systems and all that stuff. So there's always a little partnership that we kind of run around and do those things. But
how did you meet Kent? Did you happen to interview Kent when he was going through?
No.
Because you were there you've been there for 15 years. But how long was Kent there for?
He was working on a roof in Quincy, Washington.
Shut up.
He was the program manager to replace the roof.
Shut up.
So he did a good enough job, I guess. They decided.
He remodels like he gave me some secret recipe to see these walls. Like if you want to make these walls, he's given me some recipe. Coffee grounds and all kinds of things. And he's quite the little tinkerer.
So we've known each other for a while, and he was a project manager. We're a lot of project management, right? None of us are swinging hammers or.
Was he a contractor at first? Like you?
He
were
was,
at first?
yeah, for about a year or so, 2 years maybe. And then he became an employee, and he was doing a lot of the leases. He and I did a lot of leases together. So we
kidding.
We do
site selection stuff.
Microsoft does, I don't know, 80-20 or 90-10 or, it changes year to year. The amount of what we build and what we lease. So that's always changing. So
the bigger number is
the builds.
Okay, majority of the ones that you guys have are yours.
Yeah. We've decided, and other people like Oracle doesn't want to own them. They want to do leases. That might change in the future or whatever. But our finance and our guys wanted to own it and depreciate it and all those issues that help with those tax burden. So they've gone with building them ourselves. Because he doesn't really, other than now we try to, and then we can make changes on our own. Like we did concrete floors. We were one of the very first, I think, to do concrete floors instead of raised floors.
Yeah.
And that's kind of because we owned it. So we could make it and, where a lot of leases still stay with raised floor because that's what they're used to. That's what all the customers are used to seeing. And so they want to see a raised floor with the cold air coming up through the grids. And that's just what they're used to. So you throw a concrete floor at them and they're like, whoa, wait a minute, this is different. And, and when you're a customer, when you're trying to appease multiple customers, you really don't know who's going to be there. You're going to build towards a certain standard, whereas we are being very specific for our builds. We can cut out a lot of the costs and go to bare bones and know what we're going to put in there. So
Sure.
that's driven our concrete floors, driven a lot of cost savings to drive that millions per megawatt down.
So Kent started by being the PM that was replacing a roof on one of your data
Yep,
centers, and then
yep.
somehow he earned the confidence of like whoever the Steve
Yeah,
Ford was at the time, or
Yeah,
you, or
no. There was a few other PMs that were working with them, and John Raddick was another guy. We have a little consortium here that do a lot of motorcycle rides together. But he
I
was
feel like I know
there.
that name. Why do I know that name?
John, he's worked for Microsoft. He's done a lot of. He just took over some GC construction on Whitman Hatfield Whitman.
Okay, so he left
I'll
Microsoft
badmouth
and he's
him
at
there.
GC now.
So he's broken. Yeah, he left Microsoft. He's doing his own thing with a few other companies. So head of construction of a few companies. So he worked for Jacobs
Sure.
But anyway, we saw there was a lot of potential in Mr. Kent, and so he's doing great things for others.
Because Kent, when he left, he took a break and he went to, I think he was Advantage for a while, right?
Yep. Yeah, he did really well Advantage, and then got an opportunity to go to Yonder, and
Awesome.
away he went. And
They have a
he's-
pretty stacked house over there at Yonder right now, don't
Yeah, they're. I don't. Do they make anything? Have you seen anything yet?
they? Well, from what I'm told, they're going to be monsters here in a little bit. And based on some of the talent they have, I wouldn't be surprised.
Maybe build something
Oh, there's,
or a
I mean,
chicken coop or something. Who knows?
ooh, the chicken coop. I think if you were to sit down, have you ever asked Laramie about that? He's got a strong opinion on that chicken coop data center, I think.
Yeah, he's
think
got
he's a
strong
huge
opinion on
fan.
a lot of things.
He sure does, doesn't he? Big Country, he was one of the first guys. He and JT were my first podcast.
I know.
Oh, did you hear it?
Oh, I saw that one.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. I saw
That was a shit show, right? Because we had,
really. That's hard to believe that those between the three of you wouldn't turn into a shit show.
I didn't see that coming, especially when we finished. We were plowing through the brown water faster in those days. Like, I could not keep, like JT thought we were doing shots, I think. Because we literally were only drinking out of Dixie cups.
It's hard
like
to believe JT would think that.
And it was odd. It's not his type. It's not
No.
his kind. But it's funny because,
Learned a lot from JT. I knew JT when he was on electrical. He was on one of our sites. He
Shut
was
up.
he was a nobody, man. He was showing up this surfer wearing on a longboard, came rolling up on a longboard, and we're like, who is the hell is this guy?
it'll still be
And he's
him.
the electrical engineer. He's like, we are in deep shit.
He knows his shit, though.
And he within weeks was making that thing hum, and he's done nothing but projection higher ever since. So
Yeah,
he's a stud.
I was having a conversation with him about the first time I met him. I vividly remember the first time I met him. I was at Advantage Data Center in Santa Clara, probably. It's probably some program some company that you and I probably both know that was in that data center. And
Yep.
I, he walked in, and Jason Green, I think at first had kind of prepped me with what to expect. And he was not what I expected when we first hung out. And then it wasn't until later on we'd gone out. And then I was like, now I understand.
He's not the electrical engineer you thought he was.
No, he definitely had his
He
shit on
doesn't come
lockdown.
across as that.
But he's very like when you get him around professional stuff, he's like
he knocks it out of the park.
he's like have you ever seen Old School? Remember Will Ferrell in
Yeah.
Old School is trying to do the debate, and then when he gets done saying all this really intelligent shit, he like blacks out. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
That was my impression of JT when we'd go into meetings and he would just knock it out of the park, and then he would turn back into
JT.
right. And then I was like, I could respect that, right? But I mean, Laramie was the same way. I mean, all of us idiots we grew up in this space like a long time ago together. I could tell you the first time I met LD, I mean, he was maybe a PM, at Concept CSI, I
Yeah.
think back then, but it's awesome to see how far some of those guys have come. Right?
Sure. Oh yeah, it's been. I mean, you've seen some real skyrocketing. There's a lot of demand out there. As you and I were talking about how there's billionaires out there that are looking to invest their money, and this is the growth industry.
Sure.
I said it was early .com stuff, not the bubble, not the bust,
But you're seeing the pent demand.
but yeah, the demand, you had to own not a SharePoint site. You had to own a internet site. You don't care what it did. You just have to own it. And so all these people got involved, and that's where I see now is money is coming into this industry big time from all over. That wasn't just traditional IT companies. It's others that are investing in data centers, are investing in the market, and that's driving demand, or at least driving growth, and the demand just keeps going up.
But that's really good for us, in my opinion, because you have a massive need for capital in this space.
Yeah,
And now
it
you have,
takes a lot of capital.
for sure, right? But now you're having all kinds of groups that have not been invested in this space before. They're like, hey, look, and it's driving down, the cost of money is getting more efficient in some cases because of that, right? And you have more options. But now with that capital, you have groups that are able to, start buying or standing up a VMI strategy, 2-3 years out now. So they're laying out deposits that far out just to get gear or land banking more, or you're seeing a lot of things, which again, to me, based on where I sit on the industry, you're on the enterprise end user. We deal with operators as well. I'm on the ecosystem side where I'm one of those partners that are helping you guys bring your visions to life. What we get to see is where the bottleneck is, for
Sure.
labor or materials. And you're seeing it too, right?
Oh, material is unbelievable right now. But our demand is going to be just continue to keep growing. I just don't see an end anytime soon to this thing. So, but really the problem is going to be personnel. I think it's easier to build something than it is to find personnel to run something. That takes a lot longer train of growth, schools and
What do you think
getting
we're gonna have to
people.
do? I mean, because
Well,
I mean,
you and I talked about finding new streams. I mean, right now the problem in America a lot of times is one of the problems in America is everybody wants to go to college, right? Nobody wants to be a plumber, electrician, or doesn't want to do any of those hard jobs, and that's where the demand is. And the same thing in our field, we have a huge issue for critical environments. We need electricians, and we need the HVACs, and we need all those guys to run these things, and the IT guys to run the 24/7 ops, of these sites.
but why do we have to solve it with people? I mean, look, I do agree that there's a lot of people that go to college because they think that that's the best way to go guarantee some sort of success in their future. But there are amazingly successful people in this space that have never stepped foot on college a day
Absolutely.
in their life. I do like this industry for that. I also, like I was telling someone else, I'm like, I think this industry, to a veteran is the greatest thing they could find, because there's not too many companies that don't have value or see value in those transitioning veterans coming out,
Right.
right? That are like the 25 series you were talking about, or the 11 Bravos that converted. I mean, I said this, and I say it often. When I first got into this space, I was a UPS service engineer, and they were looking for Air Force guys and Navy guys and our girls, and just the type of training that we went through tended to lend itself to that advantage of being like a service technician. And then I just kind of continued to evolve and spend enough time on construction sites where I was starting to pick up construction, and I see that it's really not a skill set that you can't learn, OJT, like you were talking about. Like if you're immersed on a construction site for a year, in spite of yourself, you're going to learn a lot. Would you
Sure.
agree? And that's where you learn the dialect as well.
Yeah.
And
No, I agree. I just see this huge opportunity for a lot of younger people to get involved as this keeps growing, because we need to, the guys that started out 6 or 7 years ago are now leading teams because one, either you had to grow up, and as soon as you could grow up, we need you to take over those teams because we're expanding. Instead of one in a town, now there's 10 data centers in a town, so they're all running 24/7.
well, do you remember when like 10 megawatts was a lot?
Yeah, I remember when 2 or 4 megawatts was a lot. I mean, we just had these data centers and that was all we really needed, at the time. And I mean,
Yeah.
we'll also remember when there was only 3 or 4 data centers in all the U.S. we were working on, instead of 50 at the time.
What was it like
So,
sitting front and center? And we're going to go back. I know we're all over the place again because I want to go back to that labor thing, because I do believe that like the best some of the best construction people we've ever had no construction experience. We hired them coming out of the military, and we put them, 6 months on the job. We hire these people and don't put them. We don't charge our clients for them for the first few months because we want them to just be immersed, to learn the
Right.
language, so to speak. I have found that their temperament is exceptional. Army is great because you've been in, like you said, you could be in one of these high stressful zones and all kinds of stuff. You guys could be, taking, mortar rounds to your compound, and you
Yeah.
guys are still like one of my favorite stories is Jesse on my team was their command post was being attacked, but he and a buddy were playing Xbox, and I mean, they only stopped because a round came through and hit their Xbox and shot it, and then they lost their mind. So then they both get up, run out there with their underwear on, and their guns and then grenade launchers and start, just losing their mind. And I guess they sent a picture of it, and Microsoft sent them a new one. How cool is that story? They sent
We
some
got
pic-
around. We got around. Could we have another one?
and they did. They said, "Hey, we sent a picture and an explanation of what happened to our Xbox that it got shot, and here's a bullet round that hit it." And I guess Microsoft sent him a new one back to their command post. So he's pretty loyal to the Xbox systems
There
ever
you
since
go.
then.
Yeah. There's a lot of.
But my message is those construction projects. I mean, you've been on a lot.
Yeah.
There's not a single construction project that goes as planned. There's always a problem with something, right? There's going to be something. We'll ring it out during IST, and we'll find a flaw in the design, or maybe settings on some sort of equipment that got overlooked, or maybe the equipment blew up in the middle of testing, or I've had supply chain things where transformers are falling off the back of the truck. There's always a problem of some kind.
Yeah.
It's just how you deal with the emotional frustration of challenges, because it's a different type of stress than being shot at, right? It's just everyone's going to go home, no one's going to die today.
That's right.
So trying to figure out how do
Well,
we
hopefully.
de-escalate to make sure that no one's declaring war on each other with their contracts and stuff. Let's just figure out how to solve the problem and still climb through and fulfill the mission. I think that like there's a lot of Navy folks in this space, and I think that they would agree that they are the best when it comes to like linear checking, like in operations, where running SOPs and MOPs and all those things. That's like danger tag outs. There's a lot of things that they have a lot of discipline with, but winging it, so to speak, is not always their greatest strength. I'm not saying they can't, but it takes a hybrid leader to be able to be the subject matter expert as well as the triage expert, right? And
Right.
I've always found like the Marines and the Army guys look, one of the strongest OVITA candidates we hired was an aviation bosun's mate, and she was in a situation where she's launching planes all the time and capturing planes, and there's always a problem, and she was amazing at thinking quick on her feet and pivoting if there was a challenge. But these combat soldiers or people that have been in those combat zones, they tend to they just have a different mindset, I think, when they come to the program, right?
I think it's a pressure thing, because you have to be able to take the pressure and then mitigate the pressure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all these data centers and every time we always said we start a data center, we're already behind,
Yeah.
because the demand didn't work out like we thought, and so now the demand is more than we need, more than we thought it was going to be, sooner than we wanted. So we're always behind. So everybody's driving to build as fast as you can without problems. And it just gets into how do you mitigate that pressure, or you get burned out and you move on and say, I don't want to deal with this. I want to go build an office, or a apartment complex or something, or
Because the pressure's not so high.
because it's not, it's not such a big money. I mean, big money causes big pressure. And if you can't dissipate that and learn to how you're going to move on, then, and also you're right, dealing with, if no one's shooting over your head, I always said, if I don't have rounds going over my head, I'm not going to get that spun up.
Yeah.
Famous last words. I have been known to get spun up, but yeah, it just gets to be. We get a lot of guys in the military. We have a lot of PMs that are construction guys that are ex. There's a couple of guys that are drill sergeants that are first sergeant in the Marine Corps. I mean, we have a lot of these guys that are just used to that and used to taking the mantle of leadership and then being able to run with that. So that is always a great one to have, and being able to say what they don't know. And, that you don't have to be the leader and know everything. You just have to be able to, and then have know that someone else that you are leading knows it. Let them, give them the space to fix that problem, and then, drive on, give them the credit, and keep on going. That doesn't mean that you're less of a leader. It just means that you are able to handle this group and, keep everybody going in the same direction.
And I think that's a
So,
unique skill set. Some branches are better than that than others. Would you agree?
yeah, I just think you have to be, right. Like on a Navy, in my opinion, the Navy, you're on a boat or on it. And so everything you do from sleeping to eating to fighting your war is going to be on this boat. And you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're not going to get any help. And, whereas other places, Army, you have to deploy somewhere. You have all these different skill sets that aren't, no, you can't control.
You really rely more on other people.
Yeah, the Navy, you can control your surroundings, and I mean, other than where the boat is at the moment, but you can control stuff on board and the systems, and you have your checklists. Whereas you can try to control, but there's so many things out of your control when you deploy into the field. So you have to be able to be quick on your feet. So I guess that helps make people more. The more you do it, it's like a muscle movement. And anything you do, you get better at, and that you learn to.
I think it's philosophy. I think it's a mindset.
Yeah,
Like
could be.
one of our other strongest, I mean, we've had a lot of success with 11 Bravos in construction. We hired a lady that came out of the Coast Guard, and she was a damage controlman. And I don't know if you have any understanding what that is, but if you're in the Coast Guard or the Navy, damage controlmen are basically the firefighters and the people that fix the ship when it's damaged, like if it gets hit by a torpedo or something. So they have
Right.
to do everything from the welding to everything, but they're conditioned mentally to be a multi-purpose tool,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And she came in and she was like, "Look, I don't know much about these things." And we're like, "It's like Spanish. If I left you in Mexico City for a couple months, you'd come back speaking beautifully, fluent Spanish without a problem, I'm sure, because you would do it because you have to kind of survive, right?" And we put her on a program with the client happened to be the guy in charge happened to be former Army, and he just happened to have the temperament to learn how to train, and he'd been around long enough to where the military does teach you how to like learn, and it teaches you how to lead and be led,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And he was great at figuring out like, okay, here's somebody that has the aptitude, the energy, and the hunger to learn these things. That's all I need. So blank canvas, I'll teach him the rest of these things.
Sure.
And she took whatever skills she had from that, and they transcended into the construction side. And now she's at a program level instead of just like a project level for a different customer now. But she has an appetite to continuously evolve, and we're gonna keep supporting her and blocking and tackling because that's what they want to do. But that's the solution, to there's not a lot of college classes that teach you about how to go make an impact day one, minute one in the
No.
data center space. So where do you find those skills? Obviously, it's easier to take people that are being dumped into the trades and then growing them up to where you're at, the level of some of these guys that we know that could speak data centers forwards and backwards, even as they're evolving. But what do you have if you're not bringing them from the trades, right? You have what other options? It's college or the military, and you have a couple thousand people leaving the military every month.
Yeah. I just don't think you get. I mean, college is, everyone's young too. You're coming out at 22 or something, so you now got a lot of book smart. You don't have a lot of experience, and of course, that's what everyone is looking for: is, well, how do I get the experience having worked? So, but the military definitely gives them. You have quite the experience. You might not have all the book knowledge anymore, but now you have the experience, and what you've learned, you can translate because you've had to do that in the military. Translate your skill, what you learned in the classroom, into real world and make it work. Because you don't get to say no, you don't get to say I can't do it. You get to say go figure it out. So the same thing's happening in our construction and in our operations sides of ops. They have to figure out how to make it work and keep up. And they're under a lot of stress of 24/7. You can never go down.
Sure.
We can't be 99%. We have to be 5 nines. 5 nines of operational. So you can't even blip
Yeah.
ever. That's pretty tough.
But
So
but how do you get people? I think this is what I say is coming out of the military, you do have experience in this space.
yeah,
It's just you're pressure tested in other ways, right? Our definition of mission critical, I always said, was measuring mortality, right? Not downtime. So how do you take people that have the emotional maturity, but they just don't understand the dialect of the space yet, and then once they apply their emotional capabilities to this vertical instead of shooting people, maybe then it transcends. They could
Yeah.
just figure out a way to map it out. And,
Well, and if we do a good job, I mean, we have to keep. I mean, and everyone's working this to take younger guys and younger girls and get them into this industry and teach them those skills that they. If you have half the skills, we'll teach you the other half.
yeah.
And instead of, and there's even, we've talked about it, and Microsoft and others have talked about having their own schools to teach CE services or whatever. And I don't think they've gotten to that yet, but we're reaching out wherever we can to see this site get bigger and bigger and more guys involved. And we can't stick with one group. You can't just say, okay, I'm only gonna hire from this, because we need too many.
Yeah.
And the demand is too much. So we have to keep reaching out, looking all these cracks and crevices and pulling people out. I mean, a welder who decides he wants to get in the services and move on, and someone's got to do these works, and they work their way up and run into 24/7 ops. It's just, I just think it's something. What I love about the military guys is they all have the mindset that they want it. They want to be into something better, or not better, but different, because they're getting out. They want to do something they've learned, and they're driving on to the next domain on where they're going to be successful. And they already have that mindset. And both men and women are just a head and shoulders above what we see other places. So I'm loving going through those recruiting, cycles and seeing those guys and opening their mind to it. Because, the data center world is so different that a lot of people have never heard of it.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of teach them what the heck data center is. And then why would you ever be in it? Just like me in software, why do I want to work with Microsoft? It's a software company.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about software, and I'm not going to learn, it's not my thing. I'm not interested in writing software. So why would I join? But when you open that up, all of a sudden they go, generator mechanics? Really? You have generator mechanics? Yeah. We got lots of generators that need maintenance all the time.
Sure.
And electricians and, all those things all those skill sets that they have. So I love trying to pull those guys in.
Let me ask you a question I like to ask everybody is, what do you tell people you do?
I say I build the cloud. I build big buildings full of servers.
I got you.
But
do people ever understand that?
well, everyone's heard of the cloud, right? They know their phones data goes somewhere, and they know their the internet goes somewhere.
It's such a prevalent term that they've all.
The cloud.
Yeah.
We're now into a place that people know the cloud.
Yeah.
So when you say, well, that cloud, actually, you got to build that cloud, and that all that stuff has to be held somewhere. So your pictures of your grandpa got to be somewhere. So we're building where that somewhere is. And then we're geographically diverse, so you never lose it.
Well, and shifting back away from labor and back to like what you saw, in your 15 years of growth at Microsoft, from you guys had very small footprints of data centers. And then you went and somewhere along the line, your leadership said, hey, we really have to triple down on this new strategy.
Well, Azure, we had started Bing. Don't forget, Bing's still out there. Tell my kids all the time, don't tell me you're Googling, you're Binging. They all look at me. Yeah. Anyway, Bing is still out there. So that was one of our very first, really big expansions was Bing, because we were taking on the world. A lot of this, you have to be big or you can't make a dent at all.
Sure.
And then if we don't bring all our dirty laundry out, we had phones for a while. So there was a whole phone network, that expanded the need for data centers. And then they really connected into Azure. And we've always, Microsoft has always been like, Apple's always been the play. You have your iPad, you have all these things for fun. And then Microsoft's always, to me, has always been the business side, the
Sure.
Outlook and the Word and Excel. And so when they got into this cloud computing, and then they get into renting, you pay for
Cloud bursting.
Yeah, you pay for your using Word or Excel or anything. You use 365, right?
Yeah.
So you just pay for that every year. That's blown up, our usage, and that's really what took off on our data center. Now we're trying to, as everyone else is trying to do, AWS is one of the big leaders on that too. They want to get your businesses away from, you do what you do best, let us do what we do best.
Sure.
So that's really blown up data centers. And so it's just going to continue to get bigger.
Well, I believe that their big uplift was when they were picking up government work, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's one of their biggest ones. They were definitely the first ones. And give all kudos to where it's due. AWS has done a lot of leading in cloud computing and early on, especially with the government. They were the only players for a long time. They saw it and got involved, and so it's been really a catch up, for us.
Who is the biggest cloud provider right now?
AWS.
Who's number two?
We are.
I got you. And then who's number three?
I don't know. I think Oracle.
I got you.
I think they're the.
So it's like a race then between
It's not. I mean, on what?
to
Go
see
ahead,
who can
finish
have the
your-
most data center capacity or presence to be able to support that cloud burst.
Yeah, of course it's a race because a sales guy will say, "Hey, I just sold to this company, and they're going to need 100 terabytes or whatever, every 5 minutes or something like that, and in Atlanta." And the last thing that they want to hear is, "Well, we can't
have
cover down.
capacity.
We can't do that."
Sure.
So they were like, "Are you serious? We're gonna lose all this." So we're always, sales guys are out selling. They want to sell Azure to the world, which is great. But it's on us to keep it so that they can do that. And I'm sure there's a lot of maneuvering going on all the time on where all the data is being stored to give everybody what's needed, until the capacity comes online. So that's a whole nother world that I don't know anything about, but.
So of the time, I mean, what have you seen in your 15 years? What have been some of the greatest changes or biggest challenges?
Well, I mean, to get in the weeds, like mechanically, we had all closed loop cooling, and it was all, run on, hundreds and thousands of gallons of water flowing through to get chiller plants going and all that. And then we went to evaporative cooling. It's totally changed the game and how much water we're using and how much it costs to build a data center when you can go to that just alone. And then, so cooling is, I mean, the three things we need is power cooling, and we got to get rid of all that, and you got to have data. We have that it produces the data, right? So the power and the cooling is one of our biggest problems, and then keeping it consistent. So those changes alone have saved millions and millions of dollars and less and faster to build, quicker times. Manufacturing, we've been able to modularize a lot of stuff. So you bring a whole electrical skid mount, slide it in the door, or you put it on the outside, made it a whole lot less people. So instead of having 900 people on a site, you only need like 200 on a site. And then the manufacturers make the electrical room and connect, have it all commissioned and connect it into the side of the data center, and up you go.
The modular data
So
center.
yeah, the modulars have really made a difference in speed and so on, and quality.
Yeah, quality is the biggest thing that you probably get out of that.
Well, yeah, you don't have to ground it out. You don't have to, you have all those guys in there, and we're not building data centers in the middle of towns where a lot of guys are a lot of times.
Yeah.
So when you're building in the middle of nowhere, to find 300 electricians to be on a site is tough.
Yeah.
This way you do it somewhere else, and then you only need 50 electricians to connect it up.
Well, it's also built in a static environment, which allows you have people only focus on that one thing. They're not being forced around the job site to let other people, other trades,
Cleaner,
work
neater.
around them. Yeah. So some of the greatest things that you've got to see for that time, I mean, what are some of the greatest things that you've learned?
So I think just seeing those changes and seeing how we can drive down the cost, both environmentally, make a less environmental impact, because we're huge amount of power consumption, right? So everyone's working on that one, and how we can make them quicker and cheaper is some of the biggest challenges. I just see that, and there's always multiple ways of doing it. So I think we're learning that there isn't one good way, and just like servers, you're always looking for the next new technology that's going to drive you to even better. So keeping your eyes open for all that and not being afraid to make those changes. We have the advantage, of course, is our Microsoft money they decide what they're going to do with it and how they're going, and they're willing to take that challenge, as such as says, be bold, be able to make those decisions, even if maybe you'll fail one time. There could be so many advantages of winning that you don't want to hold back. So they want to keep driving that. Where lease sites, they have to kind of go off the status quo. So I think the biggest advantages of us doing it is we kind of lead the world in on innovations and technology changes and what the next step's going to be. But that's you see a lot of lease providers coming up with some really great ideas too, because they don't have the huge business driving them for profit, so they got to really look for where they're going to make their money, and drive down the cost.
When you and Kent were out doing leases, like, what is it that you would look for in those operators? Like, is it their ability to scale you up from a density perspective, or getting their product online the fastest?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of speed to market, and then quality. I mean, again, you can never go down.
Yeah.
So we got to make sure the quality is there, that they've done their due diligence, and the team behind it is going to be able to handle that kind of input, and drive to have us fully operational and be able to, one of the biggest things we've all got into is safety. I mean, we are huge, and it's really challenges a lot of companies when we arrive, because we want them to be at our safety limits, at our standards. And so we will drive anyone who is working with us to our safety standard. And, people have really, we've tried to change the environment on construction, doing things and really drive the safety to a new level. And I think a lot of times they have it, and sometimes it's really a pain in the butt. But, at the end of the day, we never want to build anything we don't send somebody home every night.
Yeah.
So, and we take a huge emotional event. If somebody gets hurt or something happens, we're gonna dig into every little detail and why it
lesson
happened.
learned.
Yeah. So, and other people do that. I just think we've done it. We don't do any kind of lip service to it. We will stop a whole site. We will stop everything, because we don't like what we see, and we think it could be on the verge of not being safe.
I got you.
So,
what are some of the things that you guys have done to, like, I mean, I've known you for a long time. I forget where we met, I mean, in terms of, I know how long ago we met, but probably a trade show, or I don't know, who knows, right? But you guys seem
one
to
of
be,
the sites.
Was it one of the sites?
I think we were all walking the site, and you were one of the guys showing it.
Could have been. I mean, like, that's how long it seems like we've been in this space for a long time, right? And
way before DCAC.
I know, remember that?
Back in the day.
I remember you were there during the Gary Busey years too, right?
Stop it.
Oh,
Do not
man.
pull up that video.
That was an awesome. Listen, I remember you sitting on stage. Well, I was in the front row, and I vividly remember you flipping me off.
How did you get me on with this crazy guy?
Oh yeah, for sure. But I don't take all the credit for that. I think Chris Kincaid, he's a former Air Force guy.
Yes, he gets blamed for due.
I always blame him.
Smear that.
Because it was his really good idea, and I was like, if it's a genius idea, then I'll claim it was my own.
That's right.
No,
but a real good idea.
He's awesome. He was a good dude. He was really cool sport about it too. I tried to get him on stage with him, and he's like, not a chance. He was like, he knew. We kind of knew what we were dealing with. We didn't really know what we were dealing with at first.
Train wreck.
But like, what else are you guys doing? I mean, like, I've met some of the most interesting people in this industry. Like, some of my best friends are in this space, right? And I've got to grow through this industry with them. And it sounds like you've been in this. I mean, you've been with one company, but it's had such massive growth. You've got to do a lot of different things. Like, you're not.
I've loved it.
Now.
I mean, I think I'm terrible at switching jobs. So, I mean, since college, I was, all this time in the Army, and then I couldn't get off the train. And then I got on this train, and I thought I would never work for another big company again. And, and I've worked with Microsoft this whole time. So even though I was a contractor, I just drove like I was an employee, and people were shocked when they found out I wasn't telling them what to do, and I wasn't really the employee that I was. But I mean, I just think I love the growth, and I love the diversity and constant change. And the one person's idea of a data center is not another person, and so it's really, that's what I loved about leases. You see how different lease providers would do it differently. And you learn from all that. You learn how they would do it and say, oh, that's not a bad idea. We should do this. And we've taken from each other, and so that's all fun to me. Anything new is indifferent is fun to me.
Sure.
I'm not a great rinse and repeat kind of guy, so that's why they never put me on a site to keep rolling. But I just think you always have to keep, and maybe that's why I learn is because I have to learn something new, so it's always somewhat crisis management.
Sure.
Please learn something new because you have to, right? So
it's exploding, right? You don't have a chance to.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a great time to learn those things.
So what are some of the what's some of the lessons, like if someone was listening to this and they had no idea and they've been in this industry for a year, right?
They say, why did I listen to this? We are all over the board.
I know, but that's the bourbon speaking. That's not
All right,
us.
let's go.
So what advice do you have for transitioning veterans first?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I would really don't overlook the industry for sure. No matter what your background is, it would probably work into the industry. There's a lot of people and there's a lot of veteran organizations that want to help. So really it's about your mindset and what you brought into it. So I would love veterans to keep an eye on this and so that was what I tell them. But for anybody coming out, this industry is only going to get bigger. And if you like hands-on, there's a lot of growth opportunity there. And growth also brings you to higher levels of employment, So if it's a stagnant and you're going to stay at doing the same thing every day, but we're getting bigger so much faster that we're going to want you to be a team leader. We want you to be a shift leader. We want you to be a PM or a program manager because we need those people. And we're looking for the opportunity to promote those people and move them up and have them in those positions. So I think it's, for anybody, it's a great growth industry. Don't go and be the best buggy whip maker in the world. Come into, it's only going to get more. I mean, we're just talking about all these cars, all the automated cars coming out, and that's going to take data centers. That's going to take more data centers closer to the edge.
Sure.
So now instead of these big data centers we're building now, maybe we're going to build smaller ones closer to the edge of the internet for the turnaround times out to all these cars that are making these, instant changes. So the field's not going to go away with technology. It's only going to, and AI and all the other things that are coming, they still got to have data centers. So we're we're in the industrial revolution of the next century. We're not building the roads and putting electricity out to farms. We're building the data centers and the fiber paths and so on that who knows what we'll ride on. But I still say those connections will still be used for the next generation of technology that's going to come out.
Yeah. And listen, as we bring this home, you had mentioned something earlier that caught my attention. You're like, look, this kind of reminds me of a little bit of like the .com era, not the bust, but like the sprawl, like just like the explosive growth.
Yeah, I think it's going to go. I mean, I think there's going to be a technology change someday.
Based on
Soon.
the cycle of like the 18-month cycle of chips or
kind of that was kind of like, what is it, Moore's law? Anyway, that said that the technology is moving so fast that every 18 months you're going to double the capacity. So the technology is continuing to evolve and get faster, and our problems are power and heat and compress, and how much processing power do we have. So all those things are being worked on to make less power, less heat, and more processing time, which will make the data centers smaller maybe. Or we'll put more, we won't make them smaller. We'll just pour more data into them, right? More servers into them. So that's the only thing I see slowing us down. I mean, not slowing us down, but will change. But we're still going to need data centers.
You're talking about a change though with the enterprise side. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I measure it based on the ripple effect, right? Because then the operators are impacted, the supply chains are impacted, all the manufacturers of generators to
And that's not going to stop anytime soon. I mean, we're in big growth now. I mean, if you were just making software, you could just make a software change, right? And that would ripple all the way down. But we're talking about generator changes and UPS and PDU changes and all those changes that are going to take years to make a difference. And
new
then
mechanical solutions.
the other big wave that we're going to have coming up in the next few years is as these data centers start getting old,
End of
you don't
life.
even or just we have to process. We have to change them out. Those PDUs have been running 24/7. Those electrical, all that stuff's been running. It needs to be tightened up. It needs to be reviewed.
Yeah.
Who's going to do all that? That's a whole nother industry that's going to start going. Because our oldest data centers, maybe 15 years old, 20 years old now.
A lot of retrofits.
So retrofits are going to start happening a lot more. Where's that industry and those guys going to come from too? That's still part of the industry.
Yeah, because it's
So-
different. I mean, it's a lot different. I said this on a different podcast. I'm like, building a greenfield is nothing at all like working on a live data center.
Yeah.
Because when you're building a greenfield, security is not a factor. The building's not live. You have a lot of things you can power up and power down, and you're not. If you have an oopsie, it's a good thing to learn from, but it's not going to bring down the building, right? Whereas if you're in a live data center and you're doing expansions and retrofits and you're putting
Totally different.
new infrastructure on a live backplane, that's where you could have challenges.
Oh, huge,
Not-
huge, and stay operational and make money. Yeah, it's extreme. Operation guys are always working about just bringing in new servers. That's hard enough, but going into electrical gear and tightening all that up and locking all that out is a huge process in time. And
Where do you think the best
So-
place to be in the industry is right now? In the data center industry, you could be enterprise, operator, you could be ecosystem, you'd be the consultant, the broker, you could be
well, I mean, it depends your mindset. I mean, there's money. If you're talking big money, there's brokerage and so on, and there's people who are looking for land. Across the world, it's a land grab going on
It
and
is.
power grab. Where are we going to build and where's the power available? But I just think there's advantages to whatever your skill set is. I don't know if there's a right or wrong. There's so many different people that are playing that are doing just fine. Just you gotta do what you love. I mean, don't go into something because you're going after the money, or you'll never be happy.
So how does someone that is listening to this is not in the space right now, because we'll broadcast this out and we'll focus it towards military bases
Yeah,
in hopes that we can recruit some veterans to take a look at this. And be
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm in industrial or commercial or a hospital or whatever. I mean, I started with all of that stuff. I was doing hospitals and stuff, and then
yeah, critical environment.
yeah, and then I remember getting into these data centers, and it's a whole nother language to learn. And you're sitting in OACs, and people are using languages that you don't understand. You're hitting Google right then and there in meetings, trying to figure out what does that mean, and because
Yeah.
we speak in acronyms a lot, right? So you go through and like, how does someone who's listening to this, how do they connect? Do they reach out to Microsoft? Seems like they probably are hiring. If you have a
Well, a lot, all the guys, all the players on the hyperscale have veteran. That
Hiring
what's
initiatives.
nice is veterans are called a minority status, right? So everybody's driving for a veteran hire. So if you go to any website, they'll have I know for sure Microsoft has a click and say, "Are you a veteran?" And you click on that, and then they'll send you in a whole nother group where you can get help and see what where you could fit in. And I know everyone else is doing the same thing, so that helps just to start with that. But also, there's a lot of companies. Overwatch is one of the big ones. Salute's another one. There's others that are in this industry that are trying to help specifically data centers. iMason's another one.
Sure.
So I think you just have to show interest and reach out and do some. I mean, everybody has to do due diligence.
Sure.
That's the other thing I find. A lot of guys coming out of the military, and they because you're so used to getting your next set of orders. I just get my orders and away I go. I don't have to really think through what I'm going to do. But now you're into I got to think through where I'm going to live and how it's going to work and what job am I going to have and who's going to pay me in the next week. So it's overwhelming sometimes the amount of changes they're hitting, but they need to do their due diligence early on so that they have a chance to walk through some of those decision making. Nothing's easy. We try to hand out as much as we can, but there's still always, you got to show interest and you got to reach out and find that something that interests you and then pursue that.
Sure.
So I
We
don't know.
we we have DCAC live every year, as you
Yeah.
know, and last year there's always every year we have like a survey of, hey, how were the speakers, and every year there's always like one speaker that always stands out more, that has the highest votes or whatever. And last year it was Dean, right? And Dean he had an amazing presentation, lots of data, and he just does a really good job. He's a
Yeah.
good orator, right? And in addition to what he's doing as the CEO of that company, he's also the founder of iMasons. And iMasons, through that platform, I've listened to him multiple times talk about the existential threat in our space is that we just simply don't have enough talent to support the growth and the demand, right? From the trades to the operators to the people that could build it. And a lot of these markets, like Virginia as an example, are just saturated with demand where if you have a screwdriver in your garage in Virginia, you're worth a lot of money because you know how to use it, right?
Well, the screwdriver can be your security clearance. I mean, a lot of the military guys all have security clearances. In fact, mostly all of them do. And so that's worth money. And I just don't think you have to make sure they don't sell themselves short. Don't take the earliest job or the easiest job might be you can do a lot better. And
Sure.
if you drive a little harder, you can go a little further. Because now everyone's looking for people to work.
I agree.
So,
But I'm having a hard time, like for me, like I had Aaron Johnson on from Sunbelt the other day, right?
yeah,
Awesome guy. And Sunbelt is a beast in this space, right? Without them, with all their rental gears, they wouldn't be, I mean, they're the ultimate blind spot for everything that's late or something. If something breaks or the first call you make. And he was able to be there as they were really focusing hard on solving that problem that these operators or large enterprise groups that are building their own space. Those hyperscale guys and those large colo providers, they were they were just offering everything they could, and they're tapped out. It seems like at all times. But in talking with him, he was like, "Listen, man, I wasn't sure." So he did what most veterans do: is they leave the military and they go back home. They go to whatever
yeah,
market they came from. Sometimes it's a data center market. You happen to be in one. Some people go back to data center or back home, and that's not a data center market, not even a tier 2 or
it's
tier 3.
true.
And we have to kind of capture them before that. But he has a very similar story to a lot of other people where he got out, didn't know what he was going to do, got a job working in a warehouse until he figured out what he wanted to do. And what I'm trying to do, with Overwatch is we love this industry. We love data centers, and we think that we're pretty good at helping build them, right? But at the same time, our greatest passion is reducing the suicide rate amongst veterans. And as I said, if a lot of these combat veterans tend to be the best at building things, that purpose that they have, the new mission that they gain from being a
Right.
civilian in this space, create an environment where they feel safe still, politically. When you take that and you add it to what we need, right? There's a huge advantage on both sides because now you have someone that has the emotional temperament that's capable of thriving in really stressful environments, but you also, I think that what most veterans want when they transition out is not only do they want to have a purpose, but they want to be doing something of significance, right? I mean,
Right.
think
Yeah.
about some of the cool missions you did. You're talking about Kuwait or Sarajevo or wherever else you've got to go. And a lot of these guys are Afghanistan, Iraq, and they're doing something that's moving the needle and will be recorded in history. It's of significance. So how do you do that? Well, there's this huge need. But how do we make it to where there's less people transitioning out and going and taking that $12 an hour job until they figure out how to get into this? Some cases, it's by accident. You happen to know a guy. Aaron happened to have a brother in the industry already. A lot of us just kind of stumbled into this space on accident in spite of
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
What I want to do is take that narrative that Dean had, which is there is an existential threat, and it is that there's more demand for services than we have people that are capable of providing those services. And I want to create a bridge between that gap that really just focuses on, I don't even need 1% of the transitioning veterans getting out of the military every month, right? If we have 2,000 of those people, it'd be great to get 10% of those people. But imagine if we were able to capture 10% of those people every year and just help guide them into the mission critical vertical, whether they're coming to an Overwatch who is really on the construction side or a Salute, which really focuses on the services and the operation
Right.
side
Right.
or security, right? But there's got to be a bigger platform. And I think Infrastructure Masons is doing a great job. Lee, is he retired colonel?
Yep.
All right. So, and you probably run with Lee, right?
Yep.
And I'm sure Ford runs with Lee. You guys
Yep.
are all up in that market. So if you take it and if we can combine our messaging and our narrative well enough and leverage a platform like this or DCAC Live, then we can help guide some of these people coming out of the military,
Yeah.
which will be mutually beneficial to both the veterans, because it does, as a byproduct of giving them a new mission, new purpose, reduce their suicide rate. But it really helps the industry as well. So if you take our two greatest passions and you figure out a way to merge those two things together, it's a win-win for everybody. Don't you agree?
Totally. I just think there's going to be there's a lot of opportunity there. You know, the military, at least the Army, when I've been to, they have a huge transition. You know, they really drive having all these job openings and job forums. And,
Yeah.
you know, I've been involved in some of those. And they're looking to help those guys make that decision. You know, and the guys and girls coming through there are interested. It's a little harder to sell for us, you know, because it's a data center that they weren't thinking of. They don't know what it is compared to being a bus driver,
Yeah.
you know, or being a police officer or something that they know exactly what that is. So, and that's great if they want to do that because, you know, I'm all for
Need those
we need
too.
those cops too. But, you know, opening their eyes and getting them interested gives them an opportunity that they didn't know before. And I don't think we do a really good job in the military of as they transition out to say how valuable they are. They are, you know, they look. We want to help you with your skill set. We want to drive you to help you go it out. But they are, I think they underrate themselves a lot of times, and that drives them to just go home and
Yeah.
take a warehouse job right where they did in high school 5 years before, 8 years before when they
Mm-hmm.
left because that's what they knew. So
There's some groups. I mean, Tom Furlong of Facebook, he's a Navy Academy grad, and I spent time with him once talking, and he goes, "No, we actually will go to the Navy bases and set up our own little conferences, because he goes, we want to go to where they're at before they don't want to be introduced into a, maybe they do, but there was a time where he's like, we didn't want to be a part of a hiring conference that where we were one of 10, you know, potential opportunities for people that were transitioning out they could interview with. We want to be the only one, right? So
well, it's nice.
well, that's smart. But I mean, he also is in a position where he's at a pretty high altitude and airspeed, and having been a veteran and seen the value in military, not everybody's in that position, and not everybody does see that, right?
They're
So
doing better. I mean, like JBLM, where I am out in Washington, they have IT career centers. You know, and they have bigger career fairs for everybody. And I've watched the biggest groups, you know, around the Microsoft, the Facebooks, the Googles. Those guys are looking, you know, those guys and girls are looking for those opportunities. And there's veteran, so it's helping. It's just they're like, just like me, when I see that, I think software. You know, and I think what
you gotta get that narrative out there.
dragging them out, yeah, and seeing that, I need, you know, a generator mechanic doesn't always think he'll even walk by there or pay attention because that's not what he learned and that's not what he is. And he's a generator mechanic. He's a diesel generator mechanic. Huge demand for those guys, but he didn't ever know that would be. We run more generators than freaking anybody. You know,
Sure.
24 hours. Somebody's always testing a generator.
Sure.
So we just that schooling is getting the word out also helps, you know, being at those fairs just to help say what the hell you're doing.
Yesterday, I was at a Cyrus One site, and I ran into a guy that was in operations, and he's former military. You could kind of tell by looking at him, right? So I'm like, hey, you know, which branch? And we started talking. He was a generator tech in the Army, and now, you know, now he's running a data center, right?
Yeah.
So there is transition there. It's just trying to help people understand what that looks like and how they could take those skills and then
We'll
bring
get the
them into
word out.
space.
I mean, we're getting bigger too, right? As this industry keeps getting bigger and bigger, the people are learning what they are, and you know, the kids are getting smarter, right? We didn't know data centers, we didn't know
I didn't.
all these things because they didn't exist. But now they're learning that as they're going in. You know, in high school they know a little bit of where their data is going, where all their photos are going,
Sure.
and all that we never even thought about or had the ability to know about. So
Well, the interesting thing is this, and this has been said several times, is I was speaking at like a 7x24 chapter event in Virginia, I think last week, maybe the week before, and what I was saying to them was the same thing I say to my kids as friends when they're at the house. I'm like, there will be jobs that haven't even been invented yet
right.
that these people will be able to try to pursue to support the growth of this space, right? And as long as companies like, you know, Facebook and Microsoft and all the other big, you know, hyperscalers, as well as these big operators, continue to make these commitments, you know, to hire more diversity, getting those, you can get multiple diversity boxes checked by bringing
Sure.
in transitioning veterans. For us, one of the things that we did is on June 6th, which was the 78th anniversary of D-Day, we launched what's called Anchors of Hope, and it'll last for 97 days. And it goes all the way till September 11th, which is Patriots Day. And our goal was to, we're sending out messages to 100 different partners of the industry, from general contractors to operators. And we're trying to get them to lean in and make a pledge or a commitment to hire one transitioning veteran, right? And if we could help facilitate that, we think that'll help jumpstart, because the chorus sings louder than the soloist, right? So if we could create multiple different channels
Right.
to all
Right.
these other companies that are already in this vertical, and we could help create a glide path for these veterans, and it'll be easier to transition that narrative, right? Because I always ask you, like, what do you tell people you do? Maybe you have two narratives. Maybe it's the one to the people that are your neighbors and you're in the backyard barbecue, but maybe there's a different narrative that you have when you talk to your fellow veterans or guys that you served
Sure.
with. Or
Word of mouth helps. I mean, the more veterans we have, and we have a lot of veterans in the industry already, but as they kick it out and everyone takes that chance to go talk to somebody else, and try to pull those veterans in, that it will definitely multiply as the time goes on. I mean, we're not all zeroed in on, we are zeroed in on veterans, but there's a lot of openings for a lot of minority statuses too, to bring people in that just have never thought of that.
sure,
But it's opening their mind and ideas that this is something they could think about doing.
sure.
And so everyone's looking for that. Where's that key to open that mind up a little more and get them to think through it.
Well, I hope more podcasts and more
Yeah.
exchanges like this allow us to do it, right? So,
We will.
well, what's the last thing? If someone wanted to engage with you or Microsoft, what's the trick to being successful and being able to work with a group like you guys that's so sophisticated?
Yeah, so I always say, you got to do the due diligence of looking at the job sites, and I think there's 4,000 jobs openings right now at Microsoft or something like that. So I can't go and help you find that job. You got to help me, and then reach out and say, hey, I've had a few people reach out just cold and say, hey, I'm transitioning out of the military. Can you help me get in? I'm like, dude, you got to do better than that. You got to do the due diligence, do the hard work, and then come back and say, and we have a whole site on Microsoft just for veterans. And if you put something out there saying, hey, this guy's looking for a job and here's his resume and these are the jobs he's looking at, people are jumping that all the time because they want to help. So you just have to do the due diligence and reach out, and lots will reach back to you. So yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Come find
So
me
people
on
can find
LinkedIn.
you, Wild Bill Clark.
Yep. Bill Clark. It's my smiling face, probably a little younger picture than now, but you'll just have to do a little translation.
So what about people that are in the industry right now that have been in the industry for a couple of different years and they work for maybe a low voltage structured cabling group or a tradesman or equipment manufacturer and they want to go work for you? Is that a different narrative?